The glory of Indian civilization in the words of Swami Vivekananda. The glory of Indian civilization in the words of Swami Vivekananda. 3. Context for the contest. Swami Vivekananda, the foremost disciple of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, had undertaken a Bharat Parikrama in 1892 just to have a first-hand understanding of the state of affairs of his motherland. He had been a great patriot throughout his school and college days. He journeyed across the length and breadth of the nation. He traveled on foot for most part of his journey, and had journeyed in trains only when there was an urgency. As part of his itinerary he had met kings, zamindars, scholars, and common people and saw personally the condition of people in the contemporary Indian society. He was the guest of kings, zamindars, diwans, rich aristocrats, at times slept under the trees, and sometimes stayed in the huts of poor people. What did his eyes see? How were his fellow human beings faring? He saw people who were ridden in poverty, sunk in ignorance and holding on to superstitions. There was fear and despair on their faces. Exploitation of the weak by the strong, the poor by the rich, the subjects by the rulers was the order of the day. The population was totally diffident, the race had lost its self-confidence as it were, because of prolonged subjugation. His heart felt for his countrymen. He had made some unsuccessful attempts to influence the kings and the well-to-do to motivate them to come forward to serve their fellow citizens. He didn't get the anticipated response. The indifference and apathy of the aristocratic Indian society pained Swamiji. 3. For the wandering monk at last reached the last rock of his country near Kanyakumari and meditated on it for 3 nights, seeking guidance from the divine for the means to rejuvenate his motherland. There he obtained clarity, as it were, as to his mission in life and as to the plan of action that he had to adopt to make Mother India sit on her throne in all her glory again. He made up his mind to go to the West to raise money for doing constructive work for the uplift of his countrymen. His friends in Madras encouraged him to go to the Parliament of Religions being held at Chicago as a representative of Sanatana Dharma. After obtaining the blessings and permission of Holy Mother Sarada Devi, he set sail for the USA. He won the hearts of the people of the USA with his brief but touching lecture at the Parliament of Religions. His addressing of the audience at the Parliament of Religions on that historic day, September 11, 1893, as Sisters and Brothers of America, struck a deep chord with them and stirred a fraternal feeling among all who read the address later. Swamiji became a celebrity overnight. He was given an effusive welcome thereafter at every place he went in America, and people thronged to his lectures in large numbers. For nearly 2.5 years he preached the glorious message of the sages of India, viz. the Vedanta. Then he came back to India and had set his foot on Indian soil in Colombo on January 15, 1897. Swamiji was greeted with a hero's welcome at every place he stopped. Welcome addresses were presented to him by the prominent and learned people of society at all the places where he chose to stop. People gathered in large numbers to see and hear him. As a response to their warm and affectionate welcome, Swamiji would give them a talk speaking mostly on the glory of India's civilization. In fact, he poured his heart out in these lectures. Subsequently, all these lectures were compiled in a book form under the title Lectures from Colombo to Almora. This is the 125th year of that lecture series of the Patriot par excellence. To help the youth of the nation understand the wonderful message of Swamiji, this contest is being organized. There are a total of 18 lectures, but out of them only 4 are selected as the content for the contest, as we want to expose the students, busy as they are with myriad things, to the gist of his teachings in as less number of pages as possible. These lectures provided great inspiration to a galaxy of national leaders during the freedom movement to fight against the British rule. As we are celebrating this year the 75th year of India's independence, we thought it fitting to introduce the youth of the nation to some of the thoughts of Swami Vivekananda that had inspired big names in the freedom movement like Mahatma Gandhi, Subhash Chandra Bose, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sri Aurobindo, etc. Incidentally, this year also happens to be the 125th anniversary year of the founding of the Ramakrishna mission. So the contest is a way of our celebrating the three momentous occasions. Wishing you all the participants the very best ever. Yours in the service of the nation, Contest Organizing Committee, Aryajani Trust. 6 Index 1. The Mission of the Vedanta. 1-2. The Sages of India. 25-3. The Work Before Us. 46-4. The Vedanta. 62. The Mission of the Vedanta. On the occasion of his visit to Kumbakonam, the Swamiji was presented with the following address by the local Hindu community: Revered Swamin, on behalf of the Hindu inhabitants of this ancient and religiously important town of Kumbakonam, we request permission to offer you a most hearty welcome on your return from the Western world to our own holy land of great temples and famous saints and sages. We are highly thankful to God for the remarkable success of your religious mission in America and in Europe, and for his having enabled you to impress upon the choicest representatives of the world's great religions assembled at Chicago that both the Hindu philosophy and religion are so broad and so rationally Catholic as to have in them the power to exalt and to harmonize all ideas of God and of human spirituality. The conviction that the cause of truth is always safe in the hands of Him who is the life and soul of the universe has been for thousands of years part of our living faith, and if today we rejoice at the results of your holy work in Christian lands, it is because the eyes of men in and outside of India are thereby being opened to the inestimable value of the spiritual heritage of the preeminently religious Hindu nation. The success of your work has naturally added great luster to the already renowned name of your great Guru. It has also raised us in the estimation of the civilized world. More than all, it has made us feel that we too, as a people, have reason to be proud of the achievements of our one to the glory of Indian civilization past, and that the absence of telling aggressiveness in our civilization is in no way a sign of its exhausted or decaying condition. With clear-sighted, devoted, and altogether unselfish workers like you in our midst, the future of the Hindu nation cannot but be bright and hopeful. May the God of the universe, who is also the great God of all nations, bestow on you health and long life, and make you increasingly strong and wise in the discharge of your high and noble function as a worthy teacher of Hindu religion and philosophy. A second address was also presented by the Hindu students of the town. The Swami then delivered the following address on the mission of the Vedanta: a very small amount of religious work performed brings a large amount of result. If this statement of the Gita wanted an illustration, I am finding every day the truth of that great saying in my humble life. My work has been very insignificant indeed, but the kindness and the cordiality of welcome that have met me at every step of my journey from Colombo to the city are simply beyond all expectation. Yet, at the same time, it is worthy of our traditions as Hindus, it is worthy of our race, for here we are, the Hindu race, whose vitality, whose life principle, whose very soul, as it were, is in religion. I have seen a little of the world, traveling among the races of the East and the West, and everywhere I find among nations one great ideal which forms the backbone, so to speak, of that race. With some it is politics, with others it is social culture, others again may have intellectual culture and so on for their national background. But this, our motherland, has religion and religion alone for its basis, for its backbone, for the bedrock upon which the whole building of its life has been based. Some of you may remember that in my reply to the kind address The Mission of the Vedanta 3 which the people of Madras sent over to me in America, I pointed out the fact that a peasant in India has, in many respects, a better religious education than many a gentleman in the West, and today, beyond all doubt, I myself am verifying my own words. There was a time when I did feel rather discontented at the want of information among the masses of India and the lack of thirst among them for information, but now I understand it. Where their interest lies, there they are more eager for information than the masses of any other race that I have seen or have traveled among. Ask our peasants about the momentous political changes in Europe, the upheavals that are going on in European society. They do not know anything of them, nor do they care to know, but the peasants, even in Ceylon, detached from India in many ways, cut off from a living interest in India, I found the very peasants working in the fields there were already acquainted with the fact that there had been a parliament of religions in America, that an Indian sannyasin had gone over there, and that he had had some success. Where, therefore, their interest is, there they are as eager for information as any other race, and religion is the one and sole interest of the people of India. I am not just now discussing whether it is good to have the vitality of the race in religious ideals or in political ideals, but so far it is clear to us that, for good or for evil, our vitality is concentrated in our religion. You cannot change it. You cannot destroy it and put in its place another. You cannot transplant a large growing tree from one soil to another and make it immediately take root there. For good or for evil, the religious ideal has been flowing into India for thousands of years. For good or for evil, the Indian atmosphere has been filled with ideals of religion for shining scores of centuries. For good or for evil, we have been born and brought up in the very midst of these ideas of religion, till it has entered into our very for the glory of Indian civilization blood and tingled with every drop in our veins, and has become one with our constitution, become the very vitality of our lives. Can you give such religion up without the rousing of the same energy in reaction, without filling the channel which that mighty river has cut out for itself in the course of thousands of years? Do you want that the Ganga should go back to its icy bed and begin a new course? Even if that were possible, it would be impossible for this country to give up her characteristic course of religious life and take up for herself a new career of politics or something else. You can work only under the law of least resistance, and this religious line is the line of least resistance in India. This is the line of life, this is the line of growth, and this is the line of well-being in India to follow the track of religion. In other countries religion is only one of the many necessities in life. To use a common illustration which I am in the habit of using, my lady has many things in her parlor, and it is the fashion nowadays to have a Japanese vase, and she must procure it. It does not look well to be without it. So my lady, or my gentleman, has many other occupations in life, and also a little bit of religion must come in to complete it. Consequently, he or she has a little religion. Politics, social improvement, in one word, this world, is the goal of mankind in the West, and God and religion come in quietly as helpers to attain that goal. Their God is, so to speak, the being who helps to cleanse and to furnish this world for them. That is apparently all the value of God for them. Do you not know how for the last 100 or 200 years you have been hearing again and again out of the lips of men who ought to have known better, from the mouths of those who pretend at least to know better, that all the arguments they produce against the Indian religion is this: that our religion does not conduce to well-being in this world, that it does not bring gold to us, that it does not make us robbers of nations, that the mission of the Vedanta 5 it does not make the strong stand upon the bodies of the weak and feed themselves with the lifeblood of the weak. Certainly our religion does not do that. It cannot send cohorts, under whose feet the earth trembles, for the purpose of destruction and pillage and the ruination of races. Therefore, they say, what is there in this religion? It does not bring any grist to the grinding mill, any strength to the muscles. What is there in such a religion? They little dream that that is the very argument with which we prove our religion, because it does not make for this world. Ours is the only true religion because, according to it, this little sense world of 3 days' duration is not to be made the end and aim of all, is not to be our great goal. This little earthly horizon of a few feet is not that which bounds the view of our religion. Ours is a way beyond, and still beyond the senses, beyond space and beyond time, away beyond, till nothing of this world is left and the universe itself becomes like a drop in the transcendent ocean of the glory of the soul. Ours is the true religion because it teaches that God alone is true, that this world is false and fleeting, that all your gold is but as dust, that all your power is finite, and that life itself is oftentimes an evil. Therefore, it is, that ours is the true religion. Ours is the true religion because, above all, it teaches renunciation and stands up with the wisdom of ages to tell and to declare to the nations who are mere children of yesterday in comparison with us Hindus who own the hoary antiquity of the wisdom, discovered by our ancestors here in India, to tell them in plain words, children, you are slaves of the senses, there is only finiteness in the senses, there is only ruination in the senses, the 3 short days of luxury here bring only ruin. At last, give it all up, renounce the love of the senses and of the world, that is the way of religion. Through renunciation is the way to the goal and not through enjoyment. Therefore, ours is the only true religion. 6. The glory of Indian civilization. It is a curious fact that while nations after nations have come upon the stage of the world, played their parts vigorously for a few moments, and died almost without leaving a mark or a ripple on the ocean of time, here we are living, as it were, an eternal life. They talk a great deal of the new theories about the survival of the fittest, and they think that it is the strength of the muscles which is the fittest to survive. If that were true, any one of the aggressively known old world nations would have lived in glory today, and we, the weak Hindus, who never conquered even one other race or nation, ought to have died out, yet we live here 300 million strong. A young English lady once told me, "What have the Hindus done? They never even conquered a single race." And it is not at all true that all its energies are spent, that atrophy has overtaken its body, that is not true. There is vitality enough, and it comes out in torrents and deluges the world when the time is ripe and requires it. We have, as it were, thrown a challenge to the whole world from the most ancient times. In the West, they are trying to solve the problem how much a man can possess, and we are trying here to solve the problem on how little a man can live. This struggle and this difference will still go on for some centuries. But if history has any truth in it, and if prognostications ever prove true, it must be that those who train themselves to live on the least and control themselves well will in the end gain the battle, and that those who run after enjoyment and luxury, however vigorous they may seem for the moment, will have to die and become annihilated. There are times in the history of a man's life, nay, in the history of the lives of nations, when a sort of world weariness becomes painfully predominant. It seems that such a tide of world weariness has come upon the Western world. There, too, they have their thinkers, great men, and they are already finding out that this race after gold and power is all vanity, the mission of the Vedanta 7 of vanities. Many, nay, most of the cultured men and women there, are already weary of this competition, this struggle, this brutality of their commercial civilization, and they are looking forward towards something better. There is a class which still clings on to political and social changes as the only panacea for the evils in Europe, but among the great thinkers there, other ideals are growing. They have found out that no amount of political or social manipulation of human conditions can cure the evils of life. It is a change of the soul itself for the better that alone will cure the evils of life. No amount of force, or government, or legislative cruelty will change the conditions of a race, but it is spiritual culture and ethical culture alone that can change wrong racial tendencies for the better. Thus these races of the West are eager for some new thought, for some new philosophy. The religion they have had, Christianity, although good and glorious in many respects, has been imperfectly understood, and is, as understood hitherto, found to be insufficient. The thoughtful men of the West find in our ancient philosophy, especially in the Vedanta, the new impulse of thought they are seeking, the very spiritual food and drink for which they are hungering and thirsting. And it is no wonder that this is so. I have become used to hear all sorts of wonderful claims put forward in favor of every religion under the sun. You have also heard, quite within recent times, the claims put forward by Dr. Barrows, a great friend of mine, that Christianity is the only universal religion. Let me consider this question a while and lay before you my reasons why I think that it is Vedanta, and Vedanta alone that can become the universal religion of man, and that no other is fitted for the role. Excepting our own, almost all the other great religions in the world are inevitably connected with the life or lives of one or more of their founders. All their theories, their teachings, their doctrines, and their ethics are built round 8. The glory of Indian civilization, the life of a personal founder, from whom they get their sanction, their authority, and their power, and strangely enough, upon the historicity of the founder's life is built, as it were, all the fabric of such religions. If there is one blow dealt to the historicity of that life, as has been the case in modern times with the lives of almost all the so-called founders of religion. We know that half of the details of such lives is not now seriously believed in, and that the other half is seriously doubted. If this becomes the case, if that rock of historicity, as they pretend to call it, is shaken and shattered, the whole building tumbles down, broken absolutely, never to regain its lost status. Every one of the great religions in the world excepting our own, is built upon such historical characters, but ours rests upon principles. There is no man or woman who can claim to have created the Vedas. They are the embodiment of eternal principles, sages discovered them, and now and then the names of these sages are mentioned, just their names. We do not even know who or what they were. In many cases we do not know who their fathers were, and almost in every case we do not know when and where they were born. But what cared they, these sages, for their names? They were the preachers of principles, and they themselves, so far as they went, tried to become illustrations of the principles they preached. At the same time, just as our God is an impersonal and yet a personal God, so is our religion a most intensely impersonal one, a religion based upon principles and yet with an infinite scope for the play of persons. For what religion gives you more incarnations, more prophets and seers, and still waits for infinitely more? The Bhagavata says that incarnations are infinite, leaving ample scope for as many as you like to come. Therefore, if any one or more of these persons in India's religious history, any one or more of these incarnations, and any one or more of our prophets are proved not to have been historical, the mission of the Vedanta 9 does not injure our religion at all. Even then it remains firm as ever, because it is based upon principles, and not upon persons. It is in vain we try to gather all the peoples of the world around a single personality. It is difficult to make them gather together even round eternal and universal principles. If it ever becomes possible to bring the largest portion of humanity to one way of thinking in regard to religion, mark you, it must be always through principles and not through persons. Yet, as I have said, our religion has ample scope for the authority and influence of persons. There is that most wonderful theory of Ishta which gives you the fullest and the freest choice possible among these great religious personalities. You may take up any one of the prophets or teachers as your guide and the object of your special adoration. You are even allowed to think that he whom you have chosen is the greatest of the prophets, greatest of all the avatars. There is no harm in that, but you must keep to a firm background of eternally true principles. The strange fact here is that the power of our incarnations has been holding good with us only so far as they are illustrations of the principles in the Vedas. The glory of Sri Krishna is that he has been the best preacher of our eternal religion of principles and the best commentator on the Vedanta that ever lived in India. The second claim of the Vedanta upon the attention of the world is that, of all the scriptures in the world, it is the one scripture the teaching of which is in entire harmony with the results that have been attained by the modern scientific investigations of external nature. Two minds in the dim past of history, cognate to each other in form and kinship and sympathy, started, being placed in different roots. The one was the ancient Hindu mind, and the other was the ancient Greek mind. The former started by analyzing the internal world. The latter started in search of that goal beyond by analyzing the external world. 10. The glory of Indian civilization. And even through the various vicissitudes of their history, it is easy to make out these two vibrations of thought as tending to produce similar echoes of the goal beyond. It seems clear that the conclusions of modern materialistic science can be acceptable, harmoniously with their religion, only to the Vedantins or Hindus as they are called. It seems clear that modern materialism can hold its own and at the same time approach spirituality by taking up the conclusions of the Vedanta. It seems to us, and to all who care to know, that the conclusions of modern science are the very conclusions of the Vedanta reached ages ago, only, in modern science they are written in the language of matter. This then is another claim of the Vedanta upon modern Western minds, its rationality, the wonderful rationalism of the Vedanta. I have myself been told by some of the best Western scientific minds of the day, how wonderfully rational the conclusions of the Vedanta are. I know one of them personally who scarcely has time to eat his meal or go out of his laboratory, but who yet would stand by the hour to attend my lectures on the Vedanta, for, as he expresses it, they are so scientific, they so exactly harmonious with the aspirations of the age and with the conclusions to which modern science is coming at the present time. Two such scientific conclusions drawn from comparative religion, I would specially like to draw your attention to. The one bears upon the idea of the universality of religions, and the other on the idea of the oneness of things. We observe in the histories of Babylon and among the Jews an interesting religious phenomenon happening. We find that each of these Babylonian and Jewish peoples was divided into so many tribes, each tribe having a god of its own, and that these little tribal gods had often a generic name. The gods among the Babylonians were all called Baals, and among them Baal Merodach was the chief. In course of time one of these many tribes would conquer and assimilate the mission of the Vedanta 11 the other racially allied tribes, and the natural result would be that the god of the conquering tribe would be placed at the head of all the gods of the other tribes. Thus the so-called boasted monotheism of the Semites was created. Among the Jews the gods went by the name of Molochs. Of these there was one Moloch who belonged to the tribe called Israel, and he was called the Moloch Yahweh or Moloch Yahweh. In time, this tribe of Israel slowly conquered some of the other tribes of the same race, destroyed their Molochs, and declared its own Moloch to be the supreme Moloch of all the Molochs. And I am sure, most of you know the amount of bloodshed, of tyranny, and of brutal savagery that this religious conquest entailed. Later on, the Babylonians tried to destroy the supremacy of Moloch Yahweh, but could not succeed in doing so. It seems to me, that such an attempt at tribal self-assertion in religious matters might have taken place on the frontiers of India also. Here, too, all the various tribes of the Aryans might have come into conflict with one another for declaring the supremacy of their several tribal gods, but India's history was to be otherwise, was to be different from that of the Jews. India alone was to be, of all lands, the land of toleration and of spirituality, and therefore the fight between tribes and their gods did not long take place here. For one of the greatest sages that was ever born found out here in India even at that distant time, which history cannot reach, and into whose gloom even tradition itself dares not peep. In that distant time the sage arose and declared, Lnea with tilde omega yafchuao he who exists is one, the sages call him variously. This is one of the most memorable sentences that was ever uttered, one of the grandest truths that was ever discovered. And for us Hindus this truth has been the very backbone of our national existence. For throughout the vistas 12 the glory of Indian civilization of the centuries of our national life, this one idea Lnea with tilde omega yafchuao comes down, gaining in volume and in fullness till it has permeated the whole of our national existence, till it has mingled in our blood, and has become one with us. We live that grand truth in every vein, and our country has become the glorious land of religious toleration. It is here and here alone that they build temples and churches for the religions which have come with the object of condemning our own religion. This is one very great principle that the world is waiting to learn from us. You little know how much of intolerance is yet abroad. It struck me more than once that I should have to leave my bones on foreign shores owing to the prevalence of religious intolerance. Killing a man is nothing for religion's sake. Tomorrow they may do it in the very heart of the boasted civilization of the West, if today they are not really doing so. Outcasting in its most horrible forms would often come down upon the head of a man in the West if he dared to say a word against his country's accepted religion. They talk glibly and smoothly here in criticism of our caste laws. If you go to the West and live there as I have done, you will know that even some of the biggest professors you hear of are arrant cowards and dare not say, for fear of public opinion, 100th part of what they hold to be really true in religious matter. Therefore, the world is waiting for this grand idea of universal toleration. It will be a great acquisition to civilization. Nay, no civilization can long exist unless this idea enters into it. No civilization can grow unless fanaticism, bloodshed, and brutality stop. No civilization can begin to lift up its head until we look charitably upon one another, and the first step towards that much needed charity is to look charitably and kindly upon the religious convictions of others. Nay more, to understand that the mission of the Vedanta 13 not only should we be charitable, but positively helpful to each other, however different our religious ideas and convictions may be. And that is exactly what we do in India, as I have just related to you. It is here in India that Hindus have built and are still building churches for Christians and mosques for Mohammedans. That is the thing to do. In spite of their hatred, in spite of their brutality, in spite of their cruelty, in spite of their tyranny, and in spite of the vile language they are given to uttering, we will and must go on building churches for the Christians and mosques for the Mohammedans until we conquer through love, until we have demonstrated to the world that love alone is the fittest thing to survive and not hatred, that it is gentleness that has the strength to live on and to fructify, and not mere brutality and physical force. The other great idea that the world wants from us today, the thinking part of Europe, nay, the whole world more, perhaps, the lower classes than the higher, more the masses than the cultured, more the ignorant than the educated, more the weak than the strong, is that eternal grand idea of the spiritual oneness of the whole universe. I need not tell you today, men from Madras University, how the modern researches of the West have demonstrated through physical means the oneness and the solidarity of the whole universe, how, physically speaking, you and I, the sun, moon, and stars are but little waves or wavelets in the midst of an infinite ocean of matter, how Indian psychology demonstrated ages ago that, similarly, both body and mind are but mere names or little wavelets in the ocean of matter, the samashti, and how, going one step further, it is also shown in the Vedanta that behind that idea of the unity of the whole show, the real soul is one. There is but one soul throughout the universe, all is but one existence. This great idea of the real and basic solidarity of the whole universe has frightened many, even in 14 the glory of Indian civilization, this country. It even now finds sometimes more opponents than adherents. I tell you, nevertheless, that it is the one great life-giving idea which the world wants from us today, and which the mute masses of India want for their uplifting, for none can regenerate this land of ours without the practical application and effective operation of this ideal of the oneness of things. The rational West is earnestly bent upon seeking out the rationality, the raison d'être of all its philosophy and its ethics, and you all know well that ethics cannot be derived from the mere sanction of any personage, however great and divine he may have been. Such an explanation of the authority of ethics appeals no more to the highest of the world's thinkers. They want something more than human sanction for ethical and moral codes to be binding, they want some eternal principle of truth as the sanction of ethics. And where is that eternal sanction to be found except in the only infinite reality that exists in you and in me and in all, in the self, in the soul? The infinite oneness of the soul is the eternal sanction of all morality, that you and I are not only brothers. Every literature voicing man's struggle towards freedom has preached that for you, but that you and I are really one. This is the dictate of Indian philosophy. This oneness is the rationale of all ethics and all spirituality. Europe wants it today just as much as our downtrodden masses do, and this great principle is even now unconsciously forming the basis of all the latest political and social aspirations that are coming up in England, in Germany, in France, and in America. And mark it, my friends, that in and through all the literature voicing man's struggle towards freedom, towards universal freedom, again and again you find the Indian Vedantic ideals coming out prominently. In some cases, the writers do not know the source of their inspiration. In some cases they try to appear very original, and a few there are, bold and grateful enough to mention the source and acknowledge their indebtedness to it. The mission of the Vedanta 15. When I was in America, I heard once the complaint made that I was preaching too much of Advaita, and too little of dualism. I know what grandeur, what oceans of love, what infinite, ecstatic blessings and joy there are in the dualistic love theories of worship and religion. I know it all. But this is not the time with us to weep even in joy. We have had weeping enough, no more is this the time for us to become soft. This softness has been with us till we have become like masses of cotton and are dead. What our country now wants are muscles of iron and nerves of steel, gigantic wills which nothing can resist, which can penetrate into the mysteries and the secrets of the universe, and will accomplish their purpose in any fashion, even if it meant going down to the bottom of the ocean and meeting death face to face. That is what we want, and that can only be created, established, and strengthened by understanding and realizing the ideal of the Advaita, that ideal of the oneness of all. Faith, faith, faith in ourselves, faith, faith in God. This is the secret of greatness. If you have faith in all the 330 millions of your mythological gods, and in all the gods which foreigners have now and again introduced into your midst, and still have no faith in yourselves, there is no salvation for you. Have faith in yourselves, and stand up on that faith and be strong. That is what we need. Why is it that we 330 millions of people have been ruled for the last 1,000 years by any and every handful of foreigners who chose to walk over our prostrate bodies? Because they had faith in themselves and we had not. What did I learn in the West, and what did I see behind those frothy sayings of the Christian sects repeating that man was a fallen and hopelessly fallen sinner? There I saw that inside the national hearts of both Europe and America reside the tremendous power of the men's faith in themselves. An English boy will tell you, I am an Englishman, and I can do anything. 16. The glory of Indian civilization. The American boy will tell you the same thing, and so will any European boy. Can our boys say the same thing here? No, nor even the boys' fathers. We have lost faith in ourselves. Therefore, to preach the Advaita aspect of the Vedanta is necessary to rouse up the hearts of men, to show them the glory of their souls. It is, therefore, that I preach this Advaita, and I do so not as a sectarian, but upon universal and widely acceptable grounds. It is easy to find out the way of reconciliation that will not hurt the dualist or the qualified monist. There is not one system in India which does not hold the doctrine that God is within, that divinity resides within all things. Every one of our Vedantic systems admits that all purity and perfection and strength are in the soul already. According to some, this perfection sometimes becomes, as it were, contracted, and at other times it becomes expanded again. Yet it is there. According to the Advaita, it neither contracts nor expands, but becomes hidden and uncovered now and again. Pretty much the same thing in effect. The one may be a more logical statement than the other, but as to the result, the practical conclusions, both are about the same, and this is the one central idea which the world stands in need of, and nowhere is the want more felt than in this, our own motherland. My friends, I must tell you a few harsh truths. I read in the newspaper how, when one of our fellows is murdered or ill-treated by an Englishman, howls go up all over the country. I read and I weep, and the next moment comes to my mind the question, who is responsible for it all? As a Vedantist I cannot but put that question to myself. The Hindu is a man of introspection, he wants to see things in and through himself, through the subjective vision. I, therefore, ask myself, who is responsible? And the answer comes every time, not the English, no, they are not responsible. It is we who are responsible for all our misery and all our degradation, and we alone are responsible. The mission of the Vedanta 17. Our aristocratic ancestors went on treading the common masses of our country underfoot, till they became helpless, till under this torment the poor people nearly forgot that they were human beings. They have been compelled to be merely hewers of wood and drawers of water for centuries, so much so, that they are made to believe that they are born as slaves, born as hewers of wood and drawers of water. With all our boasted education of modern times, if anybody says a kind word for them, I often find our men shrink at once from the duty of lifting them up, these poor downtrodden people. Not only so, but I also find that all sorts of most demoniacal and brutal arguments, culled from the crude ideas of hereditary transmission and other such gibberish from the Western world, are brought forward in order to brutalize and tyrannize over the poor all the more. At the Parliament of Religions in America, there came among others a young man, a born Negro, a real African Negro, and he made a beautiful speech. I became interested in the young man and now and then talked to him, but could learn nothing about him. But one day in England, I met some Americans, and this is what they told me. This boy was the son of a Negro chief who lived in the heart of Africa, and that one day another chief became angry with the father of this boy and murdered him and murdered the mother also, and they were cooked and eaten. He ordered the child to be killed also and cooked and eaten, but the boy fled, and after passing through great hardships and having traveled a distance of several hundreds of miles, he reached the seashore, and there he was taken into an American vessel and brought over to America. And this boy made that speech. After that, what was I to think of your doctrine of heredity? Brahmins, if the Brahmin has more aptitude for learning on the ground of heredity than the pariah, spend no more money on the Brahmin's education, but spend all on the pariah. Give to 18 the glory of Indian civilization the weak, for there all the gift is needed. If the Brahmin is born clever, he can educate himself without help. If the others are not born clever, let them have all the teaching and the teachers they want. This is justice and reason as I understand it. Our poor people, these downtrodden masses of India, therefore, require to hear and to know what they really are. Let every man and woman and child, without respect of caste or birth, weakness or strength, hear and learn that behind the strong and the weak, behind the high and the low, behind every one, there is that infinite soul, assuring the infinite possibility and the infinite capacity of all to become great and good. Let us proclaim to every soul, gu, eo / at ouao if indefinite integral auea is ao arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. Arise, awake. Awake from this hypnotism of weakness. None is really weak, the soul is infinite, omnipotent, and omniscient. Stand up, assert yourself, proclaim the God within you, do not deny him. Too much of inactivity, too much of weakness, too much of hypnotism has been and is upon our race. O ye modern Hindus, dehypnotize yourselves. The way to do that is found in your own sacred books. Teach yourselves, teach everyone his real nature, call upon the sleeping soul and see how it awakes. Power will come, glory will come, goodness will come, purity will come, and everything that is excellent will come when the sleeping soul is roused to self-conscious activity. If there is anything in the Gita that I like, it is these two verses, coming out strong as the very gist, the very essence, of Krishna's teaching. He who sees the Supreme Lord dwelling alike in all beings, the imperishable in things that perish, he sees indeed. For seeing the Lord as the same, everywhere present, he does not destroy the self by the self, and thus he goes to the highest goal. Thus there is a great opening for the Vedanta to do beneficent work both here and elsewhere. This wonderful idea, the mission of the Vedanta 19 of the sameness and omnipresence of the Supreme Soul, has to be preached for the amelioration and elevation of the human race here as elsewhere. Wherever there is evil and wherever there is ignorance and want of knowledge, I have found out by experience that all evil comes, as our scriptures say, relying upon differences, and that all good comes from faith in equality, in the underlying sameness and oneness of things. This is the great Vedantic ideal. To have the ideal is one thing, and to apply it practically to the details of daily life is quite another thing. It is very good to point out an ideal, but where is the practical way to reach it? Here naturally comes the difficult and the vexed question of caste and of social reformation, which has been uppermost for centuries in the minds of our people. I must frankly tell you that I am neither a caste breaker nor a mere social reformer. I have nothing to do directly with your castes or with your social reformation. Live in any caste you like, but that is no reason why you should hate another man or another caste. It is love and love alone that I preach, and I base my teaching on the great Vedantic truth of the sameness and omnipresence of the soul of the universe. For nearly the past 100 years, our country has been flooded with social reformers and various social reform proposals. Personally, I have no fault to find with these reformers. Most of them are good, well-meaning men, and their aims too are very laudable on certain points, but it is quite a patent fact that this 100 years of social reform has produced no permanent and valuable result appreciable throughout the country. Platform speeches have been made by the thousand, Denunciations in volumes after volumes have been hurled upon the devoted head of the Hindu race and its civilization, and yet no good practical result has been achieved, and where is the reason for that? The reason is not hard to find. It is in the denunciation itself. As I told you before, in the first place, we must try to keep the glory of Indian civilization, our historically acquired character as a people. I grant that we have to take a great many things from other nations, that we have to learn many lessons from outside, but I am sorry to say that most of our modern reform movements have been inconsiderate imitations of Western means and methods of work, and that surely will not do for India. Therefore, it is that all our recent reform movements have had no result. In the second place, denunciation is not at all the way to do good. That there are evils in our society even a child can see, and in what society are there no evils? And let me take this opportunity, my countrymen, of telling you that in comparing the different races and nations of the world I have been among, I have come to the conclusion that our people are on the whole the most moral and the most godly, and our institutions are, in their plan and purpose, best suited to make mankind happy. I do not, therefore, want any reformation. My ideal is growth, expansion, development on national lines. As I look back upon the history of my country, I do not find in the whole world another country which has done quite so much for the improvement of the human mind. Therefore, I have no words of condemnation for my nation. I tell them, you have done well, only try to do better. Great things have been done in the past in this land, and there is both time and room for greater things to be done yet. I am sure you know that we cannot stand still. If we stand still, we die. We have either to go forward or to go backward. We have either to progress or to degenerate. Our ancestors did great things in the past, but we have to grow into a fuller life and march beyond even their great achievements. How can we now go back and degenerate ourselves? That cannot be, that must not be. Going back will lead to national decay and death. Therefore, let us go forward and do yet greater things. That is what I have to tell you. The mission of the Vedanta 21. I am no preacher of any momentary social reform. I am not trying to remedy evils, I only ask you to go forward and to complete the practical realization of the scheme of human progress that has been laid out in the most perfect order by our ancestors. I only ask you to work to realize more and more the Vedantic ideal of the solidarity of man and his inborn divine nature. Had I the time, I would gladly show you how everything we have now to do was laid out years ago by our ancient lawgivers, and how they actually anticipated all the different changes that have taken place and are still to take place in our national institutions. They also were breakers of caste, but they were not like our modern men. They did not mean by the breaking of caste that all the people in a city should sit down together to a dinner of beefsteak and champagne, nor that all fools and lunatics in the country should marry when, where, and whom they chose and reduce the country to a lunatic asylum, nor did they believe that the prosperity of a nation is to be gauged by the number of husbands its widows get. I have yet to see such a prosperous nation. The ideal man of our ancestors was the Brahmin. In all our books stands out prominently this ideal of the Brahmin. In Europe there is my lord the Cardinal, who is struggling hard and spending thousands of pounds to prove the nobility of his ancestors, and he will not be satisfied until he has traced his ancestry to some dreadful tyrant who lived on a hill and watched the people passing by, and whenever he had the opportunity, sprang out on them and robbed them. That was the business of these nobility-bestowing ancestors, and my Lord Cardinal is not satisfied until he can trace his ancestry to one of these. In India, on the other hand, the greatest princes seek to trace their descent to some ancient sage who dressed in a bit of loincloth, lived in a forest, eating roots and studying the Vedas. It is there that the Indian 22, the glory of Indian civilization prince, goes to trace his ancestry. You are of the high caste when you can trace your ancestry to a Rishi, and not otherwise. Our ideal of high birth, therefore, is different from that of others. Our ideal is the Brahmin of spiritual culture and renunciation. By the Brahmin ideal, what do I mean? I mean the ideal Brahmin-ness in which worldliness is altogether absent and true wisdom is abundantly present. That is the ideal of the Hindu race. Have you not heard how it is declared that he, the Brahmin, is not amenable to law, that he has no law, that he is not governed by kings, and that his body cannot be hurt? That is perfectly true. Do not understand it in the light thrown upon it by interested and ignorant fools, but understand it in the light of the true and original Vedantic conception. If the Brahmin is he who has killed all selfishness and who lives and works to acquire and propagate wisdom and the power of love, if a country is altogether inhabited by such Brahmins, by men and women who are spiritual and moral and good, is it strange to think of that country as being above and beyond all law? What police, what military are necessary to govern them? Why should anyone govern them at all? Why should they live under a government? They are good and noble, and they are the men of God. These are our ideal Brahmins, and we read that in the Satya Yuga there was only one caste, and that was the Brahmin. We read in the Mahabharata that the whole world was in the beginning peopled with Brahmins, and that as they began to degenerate, they became divided into different castes, and that when the cycle turns round, they will all go back to that Brahminical origin. This cycle is turning round now, and I draw your attention to this fact. Therefore, our solution of the caste question is not degrading those who are already high up, is not running amok through food and drink, is not jumping out of our own limits in order to have more enjoyment, but it comes by every one of us, fulfilling the dictates of our Vedantic, the mission of the Vedanta 23 religion, by our attaining spirituality, and by our becoming the ideal Brahmin. There is a law laid on each one of you in this land by your ancestors, whether you are Aryans or non-Aryans, Rishis or Brahmins, or the very lowest outcasts. The command is the same to you all, that you must make progress without stopping, and that from the highest man to the lowest pariah, everyone in this country has to try and become the ideal Brahmin. This Vedantic ideal is applicable not only here but over the whole world. Such is our ideal of caste as meant for raising all humanity slowly and gently towards the realization of that great ideal of the spiritual man who is non-resisting, calm, steady, worshipful, pure, and meditative. In that ideal there is God. How are these things to be brought about? I must again draw your attention to the fact that cursing and vilifying and abusing do not and cannot produce anything good. They have been tried for years and years, and no valuable result has been obtained. Good results can be produced only through love, through sympathy. It is a great subject, and it requires several lectures to elucidate all the plans that I have in view, and all the ideas that are, in this connection, coming to my mind day after day. I must, therefore, conclude, only reminding you of this fact that this ship of our nation, O Hindus, has been usefully plying here for ages. Today, perhaps, it has sprung a leak, today, perhaps, it has become a little worn out. And if such is the case, it behoves you and me to try our best to stop the leak and holes. Let us tell our countrymen of the danger, let them awake and help us. I will cry at the top of my voice from one part of this country to the other, to awaken the people to the situation and their duty. Suppose they do not hear me, still I shall not have one word of abuse for them, not one word of cursing. Great has been our nation's work in the past, and if we cannot do greater things in the future, let us have this consolation that we can sink and die together in peace. 24 The glory of Indian civilization. Be patriots, love the race which has done such great things for us in the past. The more I compare notes, the more I love you, my fellow countrymen. You are good and pure and gentle. You have been always tyrannized over, and such is the irony of this material world of Maya. Never mind that, the spirit will triumph in the long run. In the meanwhile, let us work and let us not abuse our country, let us not curse and abuse the weather-beaten and work-worn institutions of our thrice holy motherland. Have no word of condemnation even for the most superstitious and the most irrational of its institutions, for they also must have served some good in the past. Remember always that there is not in the world any other country whose institutions are really better in their aims and objects than the institutions of this land. I have seen castes in almost every country in the world, but nowhere is their plan and purpose so glorious as here. If caste is thus unavoidable, I would rather have a caste of purity and culture and self-sacrifice, than a caste of dollars. Therefore, utter no words of condemnation. Close your lips and let your hearts open. Work out the salvation of this land and of the whole world, each of you thinking that the entire burden is on your shoulders. Carry the light and the life of the Vedanta to every door, and rouse up the divinity that is hidden within every soul. Then, whatever may be the measure of your success, you will have this satisfaction that you have lived, worked, and died for a great cause. In the success of this cause, howsoever brought about, is centered the salvation of humanity here and hereafter. The mission of the Vedanta 25. The sages of India. In speaking of the sages of India, my mind goes back to those periods of which history has no record, and tradition tries in vain to bring the secrets out of the gloom of the past. The sages of India have been almost innumerable, for what has the Hindu nation been doing for thousands of years except producing sages? I will take, therefore, the lives of a few of the most brilliant ones, the epoch makers, and present them before you, that is to say, my study of them. In the first place, we have to understand a little about our scriptures. Two ideals of truth are in our scriptures, the one is, what we call the eternal, and the other is not so authoritative, yet binding under particular circumstances, times, and places. The eternal relations which deal with the nature of the soul, and of God, and the relations between souls and God are embodied in what we call the Shritis, the Vedas. The next set of truths is what we call the Smritis, as embodied in the words of Manu, Yajnavalkya, and other writers, and also in the Puranas, down to the Tantras. The second class of books and teachings is subordinate to the Shritis, inasmuch as whenever any one of these contradicts anything in the Shritis must prevail. This is the law. The idea is that the framework of the destiny and goal of man has been all delineated in the Vedas, the details have been left to be worked out in the Smritis and Puranas. As for general directions, the Shritis are enough. For spiritual life, nothing more can be said, nothing more can be known. All that is necessary has been known, all the advice that is necessary to lead the soul to perfection has been completed in the Shritis, the details alone. 26. The glory of Indian civilization were left out, and these the Smritis have supplied from time to time. Another peculiarity is that these Shritis have many sages as the recorders of the truths in them, mostly men, even some women. Very little is known of their personalities, the dates of their birth, and so forth, but their best thoughts, their best discoveries, I should say, are preserved there, embodied in the sacred literature of our country, the Vedas. In the Smritis, on the other hand, personalities are more in evidence. Startling, gigantic, impressive, world-moving persons stand before us, as it were, for the first time, sometimes of more magnitude even than their teachings. This is a peculiarity which we have to understand, that our religion preaches an impersonal personal God. It preaches any amount of impersonal laws plus any amount of personality, but the very fountainhead of our religion is in the Shritis, the Vedas, which are perfectly impersonal. The persons all come in the Smritis and Puranas, the great avatars, incarnations of God, prophets, and so forth. And this ought also to be observed, that except our religion every other religion in the world depends upon the life or lives of some personal founder or founders. Christianity is built upon the life of Jesus Christ, Mohammedanism upon Mohammed, Buddhism upon Buddha, Jainism upon the Jainas, and so on. It naturally follows that there must be in all these religions a good deal of fight about what they call the historical evidences of these great personalities. If at any time the historical evidences about the existence of these personages in ancient times become weak, the whole building of the religion tumbles down and is broken to pieces. We escape this fate because our religion is not based upon persons but on principles. That you obey your religion is not because it came through the authority of a sage, no, not even of an incarnation. The sages of India 27. Krishna is not the authority of the Vedas, but the Vedas are the authority of Krishna himself. His glory is that he is the greatest preacher of the Vedas that ever existed. So with the other incarnations, so with all our sages. Our first principle is that all that is necessary for the perfection of man and for attaining unto freedom is there in the Vedas. You cannot find anything new. You cannot go beyond a perfect unity, which is the goal of all knowledge. This has been already reached there, and it is impossible to go beyond the unity. Religious knowledge became complete when Tat Twamasi, thou art that, was discovered, and that was in the Vedas. What remained was the guidance of people from time to time according to different times and places, according to different circumstances and environments. People had to be guided along the old path, and for this these great teachers came, these great sages. Nothing can bear out more clearly this position than the celebrated saying of Sri Krishna in the Gita, whenever virtue subsides and irreligion prevails, I create myself for the protection of the good, for the destruction of all immorality I am coming from time to time. This is the idea in India. What follows? That on the one hand, there are these eternal principles which stand upon their own foundations without depending on any reasoning even, much less on the authority of sages however great, of incarnations however brilliant they may have been. We may remark that as this is the unique position in India, our claim is that the Vedanta only can be the universal religion, that it is already the existing universal religion in the world, because it teaches principles and not persons. No religion built upon a person can be taken up as a type by all the races of mankind. In our own country we find that there have been so many grand characters, in even a small city many persons are taken up as types by the different minds in that one city. How is 28 the glory of Indian civilization it possible that one person as Mohammed or Buddha or Christ, can be taken up as the one type for the whole world, nay, that the whole of morality, ethics, spirituality, and religion can be true only from the sanction of that one person, and one person alone? Now, the Vedantic religion does not require any such personal authority. Its sanction is the eternal nature of man, its ethics are based upon the eternal spiritual solidarity of man, already existing, already attained and not to be attained. On the other hand, from the very earliest times, our sages have been feeling conscious of this fact that the vast majority of mankind require a personality. They must have a personal God in some form or other. The very Buddha who declared against the existence of a personal God had not died 50 years before his disciples manufactured a personal God out of him. The personal God is necessary, and at the same time we know that instead of and better than vain imaginations of a personal God, which in 99 cases out of 100 are unworthy of human worship, we have in this world, living and walking in our midst, living gods, now and then. These are more worthy of worship than any imaginary God, any creation of our imagination, that is to say, any idea of God which we can form. Sri Krishna is much greater than any idea of God you or I can have. Buddha is a much higher idea, a more living and idealized idea, than the ideal you or I can conceive of in our minds, and therefore it is that they always command the worship of mankind even to the exclusion of all imaginary deities. This our sages knew, and, therefore, left it open to all Indian people to worship such great personages, such incarnations. Nay, the greatest of these incarnations goes further. Wherever an extraordinary spiritual power is manifested by external man, know that I am there, it is from me that that manifestation comes. That leaves the door open for the Hindu to worship the incarnations of all the countries in the world. The sages of India 29 The Hindu can worship any sage and any saint from any country whatsoever, and as a fact we know that we go and worship many times in the churches of the Christians, and many, many times in the Mohammedan mosques, and that is good. Why not? Ours, as I have said, is the universal religion. It is inclusive enough, it is broad enough to include all the ideals. All the ideals of religion that already exist in the world can be immediately included, and we can patiently wait for all the ideals that are to come in the future to be taken in the same fashion, embraced in the infinite arms of the religion of the Vedanta. This, more or less, is our position with regard to the great sages, the incarnations of God. There are also secondary characters. We find the word Rishi again and again mentioned in the Vedas, and it has become a common word at the present time. The Rishi is the great authority. We have to understand that idea. The definition is that the Rishi is the Mantradrashta, the seer of thought. What is the proof of religion? This was asked in very ancient times. There is no proof in the senses was the declaration. Eos Fias UFOAZ UAOAE trademark AAA from whence words reflect back with thought without reaching the goal AOAKITS ZOA fast SWOAS trademark A at there the eyes cannot reach, neither can speech, nor the mind that has been the declaration for ages and ages. Nature outside cannot give us any answer as to the existence of the soul, the existence of God, the eternal life, the goal of man, and all that. This mind is continually changing, always in a state of flux, it is finite, it is broken into pieces. How can nature tell of the infinite, the unchangeable, the unbroken, the indivisible, the eternal? It never can. And whenever mankind has striven to get an answer from dull dead matter, history shows how disastrous the results have been. How comes, then, the knowledge which the Vedas declare? It comes through being a Rishi. This knowledge is not the glory of Indian civilization in the senses, but are the senses the be-all and the end-all of the human being? Who dare say that the senses are the all-in-all of man? Even in our lives, in the life of every one of us here, there come moments of calmness, perhaps, when we see before us the death of one we loved, when some shock comes to us, or when extreme blessedness comes to us. Many other occasions there are when the mind, as it were, becomes calm, feels for the moment its real nature, and a glimpse of the infinite beyond, where words cannot reach nor the mind go, is revealed to us. This happens in ordinary life, but it has to be heightened, practiced, perfected. Men found out ages ago that the soul is not bound or limited by the senses, no, not even by consciousness. We have to understand that this consciousness is only the name of one link in the infinite chain. Being is not identical with consciousness, but consciousness is only one part of being. Beyond consciousness is where the bold search lies. Consciousness is bound by the senses. Beyond that, beyond the senses, men must go in order to arrive at truths of the spiritual world, and there are even now persons who succeed in going beyond the bounds of the senses. These are called rishis, because they come face to face with spiritual truths. The proof, therefore, of the Vedas is just the same as the proof of this table before me, pratyaksha, direct perception. This I see with the senses, and the truths of spirituality we also see in a superconscious state of the human soul. This rishi state is not limited by time or place, by sex or race. Vatsyayana boldly declares that this rishihood is the common property of the descendants of the sage, of the Aryan, of the non-Aryan, of even the Mlechha. This is the sageship of the Vedas, and constantly we ought to remember this ideal of religion in India, which I wish other nations of the world would also remember and learn, so that there may be less fight and less quarrel. Religion is not in books, nor in theories, nor in dogmas, nor in talking, not even in reasoning. It is being and becoming. The sages of India 31I, my friends, until each one of you has become a rishi and come face to face with spiritual facts, religious life has not begun for you. Until the superconscious opens for you, religion is mere talk, it is nothing but preparation. You are talking second hand, third hand, and here applies that beautiful saying of Buddha when he had a discussion with some Brahmins. They came discussing about the nature of Brahman, and the great sage asked, "Have you seen Brahman?" "No," said the Brahmin, "or your father?" "No, neither has he, or your grandfather." "I don't think even he saw him." "My friend, how can you discuss about a person whom your father and grandfather never saw, and try to put each other down?" That is what the whole world is doing. Let us say in the language of the Vedanta, this Atman is not to be reached by too much talk, no, not even by the highest intellect, no, not even by the study of the Vedas themselves. Let us speak to all the nations of the world in the language of the Vedas, Vain are your fights and your quarrels. Have you seen God whom you want to preach? If you have not seen, vain is your preaching, you do not know what you say, and if you have seen God, you will not quarrel, your very face will shine. An ancient sage of the Upanishads sent his son out to learn about Brahman, and the child came back, and the father asked, "What have you learnt?" The child replied he had learned so many sciences. But the father said, "That is nothing, go back." And the son went back, and when he returned again the father asked the same question, and the same answer came from the child. Once more he had to go back. And the next time he came, his whole face was shining, and his father stood up and declared, Today, my child, your face shines like a knower of Brahman. When you have known God, your very face will be changed, your voice will be changed, your whole appearance will be changed. You will be a blessing to mankind, none will be able to resist the 32 the glory of Indian civilization Rishi. This is the Rishihood, the ideal in our religion. The rest, all these talks and reasonings and philosophies and dualisms and monisms, and even the Vedas themselves are but preparations, secondary things. The other is primary. The Vedas, grammar, astronomy, etc., all these are secondary, that is supreme knowledge which makes us realize the unchangeable one. Those who realized are the sages whom we find in the Vedas, and we understand how this Rishi is the name of a type, of a class, which every one of us, as true Hindus, is expected to become at some period of our life, and becoming which, to the Hindu, means salvation. Not belief in doctrines, not going to thousands of temples, nor bathing in all the rivers in the world, but becoming the Rishi, the Mantradrashta that is freedom, that is salvation. Coming down to later times, there have been great world-moving sages, great incarnations of whom there have been many, and according to the Bhagavata, they also are infinite in number, and those that are worshipped most in India are Rama and Krishna. Rama, the ancient idol of the heroic ages, the embodiment of truth, of morality, the ideal son, the ideal husband, the ideal father, and above all, the ideal king, this Rama has been presented before us by the great sage Valmiki. No language can be purer, none chaster, none more beautiful and at the same time simpler than the language in which the great poet has depicted the life of Rama. And what to speak of Sita? You may exhaust the literature of the world that is past, and I may assure you that you will have to exhaust the literature of the world of the future, before finding another Sita. Sita is unique, that character was depicted once and for all. There may have been several Ramas, perhaps, but never more than one Sita. She is the very type of the true Indian woman, for all the Indian ideals of a perfected woman have grown out of that one life of Sita, and here she stands these thousands of years, commanding the worship of every man, woman, and child, the sages of India 33 throughout the length and breadth of the land of Aryavarta. There she will always be, this glorious Sita, purer than purity itself, all patience, and all suffering. She who suffered that life of suffering without a murmur, she the ever chaste and ever pure wife, she the ideal of the people, the ideal of the gods, the great Sita, our national god, she must always remain. And every one of us knows her too well to require much delineation. All our mythology may vanish, even our Vedas may depart, and our Sanskrit language may vanish forever, but so long as there will be 5 Hindus living here, even if only speaking the most vulgar patwa, there will be the story of Sita present. Mark my words, Sita has gone into the very vitals of our race. She is there in the blood of every Hindu man and woman, we are all children of Sita. Any attempt to modernize our women, if it tries to take our women away from that ideal of Sita, is immediately a failure, as we see every day. The women of India must grow and develop in the footprints of Sita, and that is the only way. The next is he who is worshipped in various forms, the favorite ideal of men as well as of women, the ideal of children, as well as of grown-up men. I mean he whom the writer of the Bhagavata was not content to call an incarnation but says, the other incarnations were but parts of the Lord. He, Krishna, was the Lord himself. And it is not strange that such adjectives are applied to him when we marvel at the many-sidedness of his character. He was the most wonderful sannyasin, and the most wonderful householder in one. He had the most wonderful amount of rajas, power, and was at the same time living in the midst of the most wonderful renunciation. Krishna can never be understood until you have studied the Gita, for he was the embodiment of his own teaching. Every one of these incarnations came as a living illustration of what they came to preach. Krishna, the preacher of the Gita, was all his life the embodiment of that song celestial, 34. The glory of Indian civilization. He was the great illustration of non-attachment. He gives up his throne and never cares for it. He, the leader of India, at whose word kings come down from their thrones, never wants to be a king. He is the simple Krishna, ever the same Krishna who played with the Gopis. Ah, that most marvelous passage of his life, the most difficult to understand, and which none ought to attempt to understand until he has become perfectly chaste and pure, that most marvelous expansion of love, allegorized and expressed in that beautiful play at Vrindavan, which none can understand but he who has become mad with love, drunk deep of the cup of love. Who can understand the throes of the lore of the Gopis, the very ideal of love, love that wants nothing, love that even does not care for heaven, love that does not care for anything in this world or the world to come. And here, my friends, through this love of the Gopis has been found the only solution of the conflict between the personal and the impersonal God. We know how the personal God is the highest point of human life. We know that it is philosophical to believe in an impersonal God immanent in the universe, of whom everything is but a manifestation. At the same time our souls hanker after something concrete, something which we want to grasp, at whose feet we can pour out our soul, and so on. The personal God is therefore the highest conception of human nature. Yet reason stands aghast at such an idea. It is the same old question which you find discussed in the Brahma Sutras, which you find Draupadi discussing with Yudhishthira in the forest. If there is a personal God, all-merciful, all-powerful, why is the hell of an earth here? Why did he create this? He must be a partial God. There was no solution, and the only solution that can be found is what you read about the love of the Gopis. They hated every adjective that was applied to Krishna. They did not care to know that he was the Lord of creation, they did not care to know that he was almighty, they did not care to the sages of India 35 know that he was omnipotent, and so forth. The only thing they understood was that he was infinite love, that was all. The Gopis understood Krishna only as the Krishna of Vrindavan. He, the leader of the hosts, the king of kings, to them was the shepherd, and the shepherd forever. I do not want wealth, nor many people, nor do I want learning, no, not even do I want to go to heaven. Let me be born again and again, but Lord, grant me this, that I may have love for thee, and that for love's sake. A great landmark in the history of religion is here, the ideal of love for love's sake, work for work's sake, duty for duty's sake, and it for the first time fell from the lips of the greatest of incarnations, Krishna, and for the first time in the history of humanity, upon the soil of India. The religions of fear and of temptations were gone forever, and in spite of the fear of hell and temptation of enjoyment in heaven, came the grandest of ideals, love for love's sake, duty for duty's sake, work for work's sake. And what a love! I have told you just now that it is very difficult to understand the love of the Gopis. There are not wanting fools, even in the midst of us, who cannot understand the marvelous significance of that most marvelous of all episodes. There are, let me repeat, impure fools, even born of our blood, who try to shrink from that as if from something impure. To them I have only to say, first make yourselves pure, and you must remember that he who tells the history of the love of the Gopis is none else but Shukadeva. The historian who records this marvelous love of the Gopis is one who was born pure, the eternally pure Shuka, the son of Vyasa. So long as there is selfishness in the heart, so long is love of God impossible. It is nothing but shopkeeping. I give you something, O Lord, you give me something in return, and says the Lord, if you do not do this, I will take good care of you when you die. I will roast you all the rest of your lives. Perhaps, and so on. So long as such 36 the glory of Indian civilization ideas are in the brain, how can one understand the mad throes of the gopis' love? Oh, for one kiss of those lips. One who has been kissed by thee, his thirst for thee increases forever, all sorrows vanish, and he forgets love for everything else but for thee and thee alone. Forget first the love for gold, and name, and fame, and for this little trumpery world of ours. Then, only then, you will understand the love of the gopis, too holy to be attempted without giving up everything, too sacred to be understood until the soul has become perfectly pure. People with ideas of sex, and of money, and of fame, bubbling up every minute in the heart, daring to criticize and understand the love of the gopis. That is the very essence of the Krishna incarnation. Even the Gita, the great philosophy itself, does not compare with that madness, for in the Gita the disciple is taught slowly how to walk towards the goal, but here is the madness of enjoyment, the drunkenness of love, where disciples and teachers and teachings and books and all these things have become one, even the ideas of fear and God and heaven, everything has been thrown away. What remains is the madness of love. It is forgetfulness of everything, and the lover sees nothing in the world except that Krishna and Krishna alone. When the face of every being becomes a Krishna, when his own face looks like Krishna, when his own soul has become tinged with the Krishna color. That was the great Krishna. Do not waste your time upon little details. Take up the framework, the essence of the life. There may be many historical discrepancies, there may be interpolations in the life of Krishna. All these things may be true, but, at the same time, there must have been a basis, a foundation for this new and tremendous departure. Taking the life of any other sage or prophet, we find that that prophet is only the evolution of what had gone before him. We find that that prophet is only preaching the ideas that the sages of India 37 had been scattered about his own country even in his own times. Great doubts may exist even as to whether that prophet existed or not. But here, I challenge anyone to show whether these things, these ideals, work for work's sake, love for love's sake, duty for duty's sake, were not original ideas with Krishna, and as such, there must have been someone with whom these ideas originated. They could not have been borrowed from anybody else. They were not floating about in the atmosphere when Krishna was born. But the Lord Krishna was the first preacher of this. His disciple Vyasa took it up and preached it unto mankind. This is the highest idea to picture. The highest thing we can get out of him is Gopi Hane Vallabha, the beloved of the gopis of Vrindavan. When that madness comes in your brain, when you understand the blessed gopis, then you will understand what love is. When the whole world will vanish, when all other considerations will have died out, when you will become pure-hearted with no other aim, not even the search after truth, then and then alone will come to you the madness of that love, the strength and the power of that infinite love which the gopis had, that love for love's sake. That is the goal. When you have got that, you have got everything. To come down to the lower stratum, Krishna, the preacher of the Gita. There is an attempt in India now which is like putting the cart before the horse. Many of our people think that Krishna as the lover of the gopis is something rather uncanny, and the Europeans do not like it much. Dr. So-and-so does not like it? Certainly then, the gopis have to go. Without the sanction of Europeans, how can Krishna live? He cannot. In the Mahabharata there is no mention of the gopis except in 1 or 2 places, and those not very remarkable places. In the prayer of Draupadi there is mention of a Vrindavan life, and in the speech of Shishupala there is again mention of this Vrindavan. All these 38 the glory of Indian civilization are interpolations. What the Europeans do not want, must be thrown off. They are interpolations, the mention of the gopis and of Krishna too. Well, with these men, steeped in commercialism, where even the ideal of religion has become commercial, they are all trying to go to heaven by doing something here. The Banya wants compound interest, wants to lay by something here and enjoy it there. Certainly the gopis have no place in such a system of thought. From that ideal lover we come down to the lower stratum of Krishna, the preacher of the Gita. Then the Gita, no better commentary on the Vedas has been written or can be written. The essence of the Shritis, or of the Upanishads, is hard to be understood, seeing that there are so many commentators, each one trying to interpret in his own way. Then the Lord himself comes, he who is the inspirer of the Shritis, to show us the meaning of them, as the preacher of the Gita, and today India wants nothing better, the world wants nothing better than that method of interpretation. It is a wonder that subsequent interpreters of the scriptures, even commenting upon the Gita, many times could not catch the meaning, many times could not catch the drift. For what do you find in the Gita, and what in modern commentators? One non-dualistic commentator takes up an Upanishad, there are so many dualistic passages, and he twists and tortures them into some meaning, and wants to bring them all into a meaning of his own. If a dualistic commentator comes, there are so many non-dualistic texts which he begins to torture, to bring them all round to dualistic meaning. But you find in the Gita there is no attempt at torturing any one of them. They are all right, says the Lord, for slowly and gradually the human soul rises up and up, step after step, from the gross to the fine, from the fine to the finer, until it reaches the absolute, the goal. That is what is in the Gita. Even the Karma Kanda is taken up, and it is shown that although the sages of India 39 cannot give salvation direct, but only indirectly, yet that is also valid, images are valid indirectly, ceremonies, forms, everything is valid only with one condition, purity of the heart. For worship is valid and leads to the goal if the heart is pure and the heart is sincere, and all these various modes of worship are necessary, else why should they be there? Religions and sects are not the work of hypocrites and wicked people who invented all these to get a little money, as some of our modern men want to think. However reasonable that explanation may seem, it is not true, and they were not invented that way at all. They are the outcome of the necessity of the human soul. They are all here to satisfy the hankering and thirst of different classes of human minds, and you need not preach against them. The day when that necessity will cease, they will vanish along with the cessation of that necessity, and so long as that necessity remains, they must be there in spite of your preaching, in spite of your criticism. You may bring the sword or the gun into play, you may deluge the world with human blood, but so long as there is a necessity for idols, they must remain. These forms, and all the various steps in religion will remain, and we understand from the Lord Shri Krishna why they should. A rather sadder chapter of India's history comes now. In the Gita we already hear the distant sound of the conflicts of sects, and the Lord comes in the middle to harmonize them all, he, the great preacher of harmony, the greatest teacher of harmony, Lord Shri Krishna. He says, in me they are all strung like pearls upon a thread. We already hear the distant sounds, the murmurs of the conflict, and possibly there was a period of harmony and calmness, when it broke out anew, not only on religious grounds, but most possibly on caste grounds, the fight between the two powerful factors in our community, the kings and the priests. And from the topmost crest of the wave that 40 the glory of Indian civilization deluged India for nearly 1,000 years, we see another glorious figure, and that was our Gautama Shakyamuni. You all know about his teachings and preachings. We worship him as God incarnate, the greatest, the boldest preacher of morality that the world ever saw, the greatest karma yogi, as disciple of himself, as it were, the same Krishna came to show how to make his theories practical. There came once again the same voice that in the Gita preached, even the least bit done of this religion saves from great fear. Women, or Vaishyas, or even Shudras, all reach the highest goal. Breaking the bondages of all, the chains of all, declaring liberty to all to reach the highest goal, come the words of the Gita, rolls like thunder the mighty voice of Krishna, even in this life they have conquered relativity, whose minds are firmly fixed upon the sameness, for God is pure and the same to all, therefore such are said to be living in God. Thus seeing the same Lord equally present everywhere, the sage does not injure the self by the self, and thus reaches the highest goal. As it were to give a living example of this preaching, as it were to make at least one part of it practical, the preacher himself came in another form, and this was Shakyamuni, the preacher to the poor and the miserable, he who rejected even the language of the gods to speak in the language of the people, so that he might reach the hearts of the people, he who gave up a throne to live with beggars, and the poor, and the downcast, he who pressed the pariah to his breast like a second Rama. You all know about his great work, his grand character. But the work had one great defect, and for that we are suffering even today. No blame attaches to the Lord. He is pure and glorious, but unfortunately such high ideals could not be well assimilated by the different uncivilized and uncultured races of mankind who flocked within the fold of the Aryans. These races, with varieties of superstition and hideous worship, rushed within the sages of India 41 the fold of the Aryans and for a time appeared as if they had become civilized, but before a century had passed they brought out their snakes, their ghosts, and all the other things their ancestors used to worship, and thus the whole of India became one degraded mass of superstition. The earlier Buddhists in their rage against the killing of animals had denounced the sacrifices of the Vedas, and these sacrifices used to be held in every house. There was a fire burning, and that was all the paraphernalia of worship. These sacrifices were obliterated, and in their place came gorgeous temples, gorgeous ceremonies, and gorgeous priests, and all that you see in India in modern times. I smile when I read books written by some modern people who ought to have known better, that the Buddha was the destroyer of Brahminical idolatry. Little do they know that Buddhism created Brahminism and idolatry in India. There was a book written a year or two ago by a Russian gentleman, who claimed to have found out a very curious life of Jesus Christ, and in one part of the book he says that Christ went to the temple of Jagannath to study with the Brahmins, but became disgusted with their exclusiveness and their idols, and so he went to the lamas of Tibet instead, became perfect, and went home. To any man who knows anything about Indian history, that very statement proves that the whole thing was a fraud, because the temple of Jagannath is an old Buddhistic temple. We took this and others over and re-Hinduised them. We shall have to do many things like that yet. That is Jagannath, and there was not one Brahmin there then, and yet we are told that Jesus Christ came to study with the Brahmins there. So says our great Russian archaeologist. Thus, in spite of the preaching of mercy to animals, in spite of the sublime ethical religion, in spite of the hair-splitting discussions about the existence or non-existence of a permanent 42 the glory of Indian civilization soul, the whole building of Buddhism tumbled down piecemeal, and the ruin was simply hideous. I have neither the time nor the inclination to describe to you the hideousness that came in the wake of Buddhism. The most hideous ceremonies, the most horrible, the most obscene books that human hands ever wrote or the human brain ever conceived, the most bestial forms that ever passed under the name of religion, have all been the creation of degraded Buddhism. But India has to live, and the Spirit of the Lord's descended again. He who declared, "I will come whenever virtue subsides," came again, and this time the manifestation was in the south, and uprose that young Brahmin of whom it has been declared that at the age of 16 he had completed all his writings, the marvelous boy Shankaracharya arose. The writings of this boy of 16 are the wonders of the modern world, and so was the boy. He wanted to bring back the Indian world to its pristine purity, but think of the amount of the task before him. I have told you a few points about the state of things that existed in India. All these horrors that you are trying to reform are the outcome of that reign of degradation. The Tartars and the Baluchis and all the hideous races of mankind came to India and became Buddhists, and assimilated with us, and brought their national customs, and the whole of our national life became a huge page of the most horrible and the most bestial customs. That was the inheritance which that boy got from the Buddhists, and from that time to this, the whole work in India is a reconquest of this Buddhistic degradation by the Vedanta. It is still going on, it is not yet finished. Shankara came, a great philosopher, and showed that the real essence of Buddhism and that of the Vedanta are not very different, but that the disciples did not understand the master and have degraded themselves, denied the existence of the soul and of God, and have become atheists. That was what Shankara the sages of India 43 showed, and all the Buddhists began to come back to the old religion. But then they had become accustomed to all these forms. What could be done? Then came the brilliant Ramanuj. Shankara, with his great intellect, I am afraid, had not as great a heart. Ramanuja's heart was greater. He felt for the downtrodden, he sympathized with them. He took up the ceremonies, the accretions that had gathered, made them pure so far as they could be, and instituted new ceremonies, new methods of worship, for the people who absolutely required them. At the same time, he opened the door to the highest, spiritual worship from the Brahmin to the Pariah. That was Ramanuja's work. That work rolled on, invaded the north, was taken up by some great leaders there, but that was much later, during the Mohammedan rule, and the brightest of these prophets of comparatively modern times in the north was Chaitanya. You may mark one characteristic since the time of Ramanuj: the opening of the door of spirituality to everyone. That has been the watchword of all prophets succeeding Ramanuj, as it had been the watchword of all the prophets before Shankara. I do not know why Shankara should be represented as rather exclusive. I do not find anything in his writings which is exclusive. As in the case of the declarations of the Lord Buddha, this exclusiveness that has been attributed to Shankara's teachings is most possibly not due to his teachings, but to the incapacity of his disciples. This one great northern sage, Chaitanya, represented the mad love of the Gopis. Himself a Brahmin, born of one of the most rationalistic families of the day, himself a professor of logic, fighting and gaining a word victory for this he had learned from his childhood as the highest ideal of life, and yet through the mercy of some sage the whole life of that man became changed. He gave up his fight, his quarrels, his professorship of 40 for the glory of Indian civilization logic, and became one of the greatest teachers of bhakti the world has ever known. Mad Chaitanya. His bhakti rolled over the whole land of Bengal, bringing solace to everyone. His love knew no bounds. The saint or the sinner, the Hindu or the Mohammedan, the pure or the impure, the prostitute, the street walker, all had a share in his love, all had a share in his mercy, and even to the present day, although greatly degenerated, as everything does become in time, his sect is the refuge of the poor, of the downtrodden, of the outcast, of the weak, of those who have been rejected by all society. But at the same time I must remark for truth's sake that we find this, in the philosophic sects we find wonderful liberalisms. There is not a man who follows Shankara who will say that all the different sects of India are really different. At the same time, he was a tremendous upholder of exclusiveness as regards caste. But with every Vaishnavite preacher we find a wonderful liberalism as to the teaching of caste questions, but exclusiveness as regards religious questions. The one had a great head, the other a large heart, and the time was ripe for one to be born, the embodiment of both this head and heart. The time was ripe for one to be born who in one body would have the brilliant intellect of Shankara and the wonderfully expansive, infinite heart of Chaitanya, one who would see in every sect the same spirit working, the same God, one who would see God in every being, one whose heart would weep for the poor, for the weak, for the outcast, for the downtrodden. For everyone in this world, inside India or outside India, and at the same time whose grand brilliant intellect would conceive of such noble thoughts as would harmonize all conflicting sects, not only in India but outside of India, and bring a marvelous harmony, the universal religion of head and heart into existence. Such a man was born, and I had the good fortune the sages of India 45 to sit at his feet for years. The time was ripe. It was necessary that such a man should be born, and he came, and the most wonderful part of it was that his life's work was just near a city which was full of Western thought, a city which had run mad after these Occidental ideas, a city which had become more Europeanized than any other city in India. There he lived, without any book learning whatsoever. This great intellect never learned even to write his own name *, but the most graduates of our university found in him an intellectual giant. He was a strange man, this Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa. It is a long, long story, and I have no time to tell anything about him tonight. Let me now only mention the great Sri Ramakrishna, the fulfillment of the Indian sages, the sage for the time, one whose teaching is just now, in the present time, most beneficial. And mark the divine power working behind the man. The son of a poor priest, born in an out-of-the-way village, unknown and unthought of, today is worshipped literally by thousands in Europe and America, and tomorrow will be worshipped by thousands more. Who knows the plans of the Lord? Now, my brothers, if you do not see the hand, the finger of providence, it is because you are blind, born blind indeed. If time comes, and another opportunity, I will speak to you more fully about him. Only let me say now that if I have told you one word of truth, it was his and his alone, and if I have told you many things which were not true, which were not correct, which were not beneficial to the human race, they were all mine, and on me is the responsibility. 46 The Glory of Indian Civilization. The work before us, delivered at the Triplicane Literary Society, Madras. The problem of life is becoming deeper and broader every day as the world moves on. The watchword and the essence have been preached in the days of yore when the Vedantic truth was first discovered, the solidarity of all life. One atom in this universe cannot move without dragging the whole world along with it. There cannot be any progress without the whole world following in the wake, and it is becoming every day clearer that the solution of any problem can never be attained on racial, or national, or narrow grounds. Every idea has to become broad till it covers the whole of this world, every aspiration must go on increasing till it has engulfed the whole of humanity, nay, the whole of life, within its scope. This will explain why our country for the last few centuries has not been what she was in the past. We find that one of the causes which led to this degeneration was the narrowing of our view, narrowing the scope of our actions. Two curious nations there have been sprung of the same race, but placed in different circumstances and environments, working out the problems of life each in its own particular way. I mean the ancient Hindu and the ancient Greek. The Indian Aryan bounded on the north by the snow caps of the Himalayas, with fresh-water rivers like rolling oceans surrounding him in the plains, with eternal forests which, to him, seemed to be the end of the world, turned his vision inward, and given the natural instinct, the superfine brain of the Aryan, with this sublime scenery surrounding him, the natural result was that he became the work before us 47 introspective. The analysis of his own mind was the great theme of the Indo-Aryan. With the Greek, on the other hand, who arrived at a part of the earth which was more beautiful than sublime, the beautiful islands of the Grecian archipelago, nature all around him generous yet simple, his mind naturally went outside. It wanted to analyze the external world. And as a result we find that from India have sprung all the analytical sciences, and from Greece all the sciences of generalization. The Hindu mind went on in its own direction and produced the most marvelous results. Even at the present day, the logical capacity of the Hindus, and the tremendous power which the Indian brain still possesses, is beyond compare. We all know that our boys pitched against the boys of any other country triumph always. At the same time when the national vigor went, perhaps 1 or 2 centuries before the Mohammedan conquest of India, this national faculty became so much exaggerated that it degraded itself, and we find some of this degradation in everything in India, in art, in music, in sciences, in everything. In art, no more was there a broad conception, no more the symmetry of form and sublimity of conception, but the tremendous attempt at the ornate and florid style had arisen. The originality of the race seemed to have been lost. In music no more were there the soul-stirring ideas of the ancient Sanskrit music, no more did each note stand, as it were, on its own feet, and produce the marvelous harmony, but each note had lost its individuality. The whole of modern music is a jumble of notes, a confused mass of curves. That is a sign of degradation in music. So, if you analyze your idealistic conceptions, you will find the same attempt at ornate figures, and loss of originality. And even in religion, your special field, there came the most horrible degradations. What can you expect of a race which for hundreds of years has been busy in discussing such momentous problems as whether we should drink a glass of water with the right hand? 48 The glory of Indian civilization or the left. What more degradation can there be than that the greatest minds of a country have been discussing about the kitchen for several hundreds of years, discussing whether I may touch you or you touch me, and what is the penance for this touching. The themes of the Vedanta, the sublimest and the most glorious conceptions of God and soul ever preached on earth, were half lost, buried in the forests, preserved by a few sannyasins, while the rest of the nation discussed the momentous questions of touching each other, and dress, and food. The Mohammedan conquest gave us many good things, no doubt. Even the lowest man in the world can teach something to the highest. At the same time, it could not bring vigor into the race. Then for good or evil, the English conquest of India took place. Of course every conquest is bad, for conquest is an evil, foreign government is an evil, no doubt, but even through evil comes good sometimes, and the great good of the English conquest is this: England, nay the whole of Europe, has to thank Greece for its civilization. It is Greece that speaks through everything in Europe. Every building, every piece of furniture has the impress of Greece upon it. European science and art are nothing but Grecian. Today the ancient Greek is meeting the ancient Hindu on the soil of India. Thus slowly and silently the leaven has come, the broadening, the life-giving and the revivalist movement that we see all around us has been worked out by these forces together. A broader and more generous conception of life is before us, and although at first we have been deluded a little and wanted to narrow things down, we are finding out today that these generous impulses which are at work, these broader conceptions of life, are the logical interpretation of what is in our ancient books. They are the carrying out, to the rigorously logical effect, of the primary conceptions of our own ancestors. To become broad, to go out, to amalgamate, to universalize, is the end of our aims. And all the work before us 49 the time we have been making ourselves smaller and smaller, and dissociating ourselves, contrary to the plans laid down our scriptures. Several dangers are in the way, and one is that of the extreme conception that we are the people in the world. With all my love for India, and with all my patriotism and veneration for the ancients, I cannot but think that we have to learn many things from other nations. We must be always ready to sit at the feet of all, for, mark you, every one can teach us great lessons. Says our great lawgiver, Manu, receive some good knowledge even from the lowborn, and even from the man of lowest birth learn by service the road to heaven. We, therefore, as true children of Manu, must obey his commands and be ready to learn the lessons of this life or the life hereafter from anyone who can teach us. At the same time, we must not forget that we have also to teach a great lesson to the world. We cannot do without the world outside India. It was our foolishness that we thought we could, and we have paid the penalty by about 1,000 years of slavery. That we did not go out to compare things with other nations, did not mark the workings that have been all around us, has been the one great cause of this degradation of the Indian mind. We have paid the penalty, let us do it no more. All such foolish ideas that Indians must not go out of India are childish. They must be knocked on the head. The more you go out and travel among the nations of the world, the better for you and for your country. If you had done that for hundreds of years past, you would not be here today at the feet of every nation that wants to rule India. The first manifest effect of life is expansion. You must expand if you want to live. The moment you have ceased to expand, death is upon you, danger is ahead. I went to America and Europe, to which you so kindly allude. I have to, because that is the first sign of the revival of national life, expansion. This reviving national life, 50 the glory of Indian civilization expanding inside, threw me off, and thousands will be thrown off in that way. Mark my words, it has got to come if this nation lives at all. This question, therefore, is the greatest of the signs of the revival of national life, and through this expansion our quota of offering to the general mass of human knowledge, our contribution to the general upheaval of the world, is going out to the external world. Again, this is not a new thing. Those of you who think that the Hindus have been always confined within the four walls of their country through all ages, are entirely mistaken. You have not studied the old books, You have not studied the history of the race aright if you think so. Each nation must give in order to live. When you give life, you will have life. When you receive, you must pay for it by giving to all others, and that we have been living for so many thousands of years is a fact that stares us in the face, and the solution that remains is that we have been always giving to the outside world, whatever the ignorant may think. But the gift of India is the gift of religion and philosophy and wisdom and spirituality. And religion does not want cohorts to march before its path and clear its way. Wisdom and philosophy do not want to be carried on floods of blood. Wisdom and philosophy do not march upon bleeding human bodies, do not march with violence but come on the wings of peace and love, and that has always been so. Therefore, we had to give. I was asked by a young lady in London, "What have you Hindus done? You have never even conquered a single nation." That is true from the point of view of the Englishman, the brave, the heroic. The Kshatriya conquest is the greatest glory that one man can have over another. That is true from his point of view, but from ours it is quite the opposite. If I ask myself what has been the cause of India's greatness, I answer, because we have never conquered. That is our glory. You are hearing every day, and the work before us 51 sometimes, I am sorry to say, from men who ought to know better, denunciations of our religion, because it is not at all a conquering religion. To my mind that is the argument why our religion is truer than any other religion, because it never conquered, because it never shed blood, because its mouth always shed on all, words of blessing, of peace, words of love and sympathy. It is here and here alone that the ideals of toleration were first preached. And it is here and here alone that toleration and sympathy have become practical. It is theoretical in every other country. It is here and here alone, that the Hindu builds mosques for the Mohammedans and churches for the Christians. So, you see, our message has gone out to the world many a time, but slowly, silently, unperceived. It is on a par with everything in India. The one characteristic of Indian thought is its silence, its calmness. At the same time the tremendous power that is behind it is never expressed by violence. It is always the silent mesmerism of Indian thought. If a foreigner takes up our literature to study, at first it is disgusting to him, there is not the same stir, perhaps, the same amount of go that rouses him instantly. Compare the tragedies of Europe with our tragedies. The one is full of action, that rouses you for the moment, but when it is over there comes the reaction, and everything is gone, washed off as it were from your brains. Indian tragedies are like the mesmerist's power, quiet, silent, but as you go on studying them they fascinate you, you cannot move, you are bound, and whoever has dared to touch our literature has felt the bondage, and is there bound forever. Like the gentle dew that falls unseen and unheard, and yet brings into blossom the fairest of roses, has been the contribution of India to the thought of the world. Silent, unperceived, yet omnipotent in its effect, it has revolutionized the thought of the world, yet nobody knows when it did so. It was once remarked to me, how difficult it is to ascertain the 52 the glory of Indian civilization name of any writer in India, to which I replied, that is the Indian idea. Indian writers are not like modern writers who steal 90% of their ideas from other authors, while only 10% is their own, and they take care to write a preface in which they say, "For these ideas I am responsible." Those great master minds producing momentous results in the hearts of mankind were content to write their books without even putting their names, and to die quietly, leaving the books to posterity. Who knows the writers of our philosophy, who knows the writers of our Puranas? They all pass under the generic name of Vyasa and Kapila and so on. They have been true children of Sri Krishna. They have been true followers of the Gita, they practically carried out the great mandate, to work you have the right, but not to the fruits thereof. Thus India is working upon the world, but one condition is necessary. Thoughts like merchandise can only run through channels made by somebody. Roads have to be made before even thought can travel from one place to another, and whenever in the history of the world a great conquering nation has arisen, linking the different parts of the world together, then has poured through these channels the thought of India and thus entered into the veins of every race. Before even the Buddhists were born, there are evidences accumulating every day that Indian thought penetrated the world. Before Buddhism, Vedanta had penetrated into China, into Persia, and the islands of the Eastern Archipelago. Again, when the mighty mind of the Greek had linked the different parts of the Eastern world together, there came Indian thought, and Christianity with all its boasted civilization is but a collection of little bits of Indian thought. Ours is the religion of which Buddhism with all its greatness is a rebel child, and of which Christianity is a very patchy imitation. One of these cycles has again arrived. There is the tremendous power of England, which the work before us 53 has linked the different parts of the world together. English roads no more are content like Roman roads to run over lands, but they have also ploughed the deep in all directions. From ocean to ocean run the roads of England. Every part of the world has been linked to every other part, and electricity plays a most marvelous part as the new messenger. Under all these circumstances we find again India reviving and ready to give her own quota to the progress and civilization of the world. And that I have been forced, as it were, by nature, to go over and preach to America and England is the result. Every one of us ought to have seen that the time had arrived. Everything looks propitious, and Indian thought, philosophical and spiritual, must once more go over and conquer the world. The problem before us, therefore, is assuming larger proportions every day. It is not only that we must revive our own country, that is a small matter. I am an imaginative man and my idea is the conquest of the whole world by the Hindu race. There have been great conquering races in the world. We also have been great conquerors. The story of our conquest has been described by that noble emperor of India, Asoka, as the conquest of religion and of spirituality. Once more the world must be conquered by India. This is the dream of my life, and I wish that each one of you who hear me today will have the same dream in your minds, and stop not till you have realized the dream. They will tell you every day that we had better look to our own homes first and then go to work outside. But I will tell you in plain language that you work best when you work for others. The best work that you ever did for yourselves was when you worked for others, trying to disseminate your ideas in foreign languages beyond the seas, and this very meeting is proof how the attempt to enlighten other countries with your thoughts is helping your own country. 1/4 of the effect that has been 54 the glory of Indian civilization produced in this country by my going to England and America would not have been brought about, had I confined my ideas only to India. This is the great ideal before us, and everyone must be ready for it, the conquest of the whole world by India, nothing less than that, and we must all get ready for it, strain every nerve for it. Let foreigners come and flood the land with their armies, never mind. Up, India, and conquer the world with your spirituality. As has been declared on this soil first, love must conquer hatred, hatred cannot conquer itself. Materialism and all its miseries can never be conquered by materialism. Armies, when they attempt to conquer armies, only multiply and make brutes of humanity. Spirituality must conquer the West. Slowly they are finding out that what they want is spirituality to preserve them as nations. They are waiting for it, they are eager for it. Where is the supply to come from? Where are the men ready to go out to every country in the world with the messages of the great sages of India? Where are the men who are ready to sacrifice everything, so that this message shall reach every corner of the world? Such heroic spurs are wanted to help the spread of truth. Such heroic workers are wanted to go abroad and help to disseminate the great truths of the Vedanta. The world wants it, without it the world will be destroyed. The whole of the Western world is on a volcano which may burst tomorrow, go to pieces tomorrow. They have searched every corner of the world and have found no respite. They have drunk deep of the cup of pleasure and found it vanity. Now is the time to work so that India's spiritual ideas may penetrate deep into the West. Therefore, young men of Madras, I specially ask you to remember this. We must go out, we must conquer the world through our spirituality and philosophy. There is no other alternative, we must do it or die. The only condition of national life, of awakened and vigorous national life, is the conquest of the world by Indian thought. The work before us 55 at the same time, we must not forget that what I mean by the conquest of the world by spiritual thought is the sending out of the life-giving principles, not the hundreds of superstitions that we have been hugging to our breasts for centuries. These have to be weeded out even on this soil, and thrown aside, so that they may die forever. These are the causes of the degradation of the race and will lead to softening of the brain. That brain which cannot think high and noble thoughts, which has lost all power of originality, which has lost all vigor, that brain which is always poisoning itself with all sorts of little superstitions passing under the name of religion, we must beware of. In our sight, here in India, there are several dangers. Of these, the two, Scylla and Charybdis, rank materialism and its opposite errant superstition, must be avoided. There is the man today who, after drinking the cup of Western wisdom, thinks that he knows everything. He laughs at the ancient sages. All Hindu thought to him is errant trash philosophy, mere child's prattle, and religion the superstition of fools. On the other hand, there is the man educated, but a sort of monomaniac, who runs to the other extreme and wants to explain the omen of this and that. He has philosophical and metaphysical, and Lord knows what other puerile explanations for every superstition that belongs to his peculiar race, or his peculiar gods, or his peculiar village. Every little village superstition is to him a mandate of the Vedas, and upon the carrying out of it, according to him, depends the national life. You must beware of this. I would rather see every one of you rank atheists than superstitious fools, for the atheist is alive and you can make something out of him. But if superstition enters, the brain is gone, the brain is softening, degradation has seized upon the life. Avoid these two. Brave, bold men, these are what we want. What we want is vigor in the blood, strength in the nerves, iron muscles and nerves of steel, not softening namby-pamby ideas. Avoid all these. Avoid all mystery. There is no 56 the glory of Indian civilization mystery in religion. Is there any mystery in the Vedanta, or in the Vedas, or in the Samhitas, or in the Puranas? What secret societies did the sages of yore establish to preach their religion? What sleight of hand tricks are there recorded as used by them to bring their grand truths to humanity? Mystery mongering and superstition are always signs of weakness. These are always signs of degradation and of death. Therefore, beware of them, be strong, and stand on your own feet. Great things are there, most marvelous things. We may call them supernatural things so far as our ideas of nature go, but not one of these things is a mystery. It was never preached on this soil that the truths of religion were mysteries or that they were the property of secret societies sitting on the snow caps of the Himalayas. I have been in the Himalayas. You have not been there, it is several hundreds of miles from your homes. I am a sannyasin, and I have been for the last 14 years on my feet. These mysterious societies do not exist anywhere. Do not run after these superstitions. Better for you and for the race that you become rank atheists, because you would have strength, but these are degradation and death. Shame on humanity that strong men should spend their time on these superstitions, spend all their time in inventing allegories to explain the most rotten superstitions of the world. Be bold, do not try to explain everything that way. The fact is that we have many superstitions, many bad spots and sores on our body. These have to be excised, cut off, and destroyed, but these do not destroy our religion, our national life, our spirituality. Every principle of religion is safe, and the sooner these black spots are purged away, the better the principles will shine, the more gloriously. Stick to them. You hear claims made by every religion as being the universal religion of the world. Let me tell you in the first place that perhaps there never will be such a thing, but if there is the work before us 57 religion which can lay claim to be that, it is only our religion and no other, because every other religion depends on some person or persons. All the other religions have been built round the life of what they think a historical man, and what they think the strength of religion is really the weakness, for disprove the historicity of the man and the whole fabric tumbles to the ground. Half the lives of these great founders of religions have been broken into pieces, and the other half doubted very seriously. As such, every truth that had its sanction only in their words vanishes into air. But the truths of our religion, although we have persons by the score, do not depend upon them. The glory of Krishna is not that he was Krishna, but that he was the great teacher of Vedanta. If he had not been so, his name would have died out of India in the same way as the name of Buddha has done. Thus our allegiance is to the principles always, and not to the persons. Persons are but the embodiments, the illustrations of the principles. If the principles are there, the persons will come by the thousands and millions. If the principle is safe, persons like Buddha will be born by the hundreds and thousands. But if the principle is lost and forgotten and the whole of national life tries to cling round a so-called historical person, woe unto that religion, danger unto that religion. Ours is the only religion that does not depend on a person or persons, it is based upon principles. At the same time there is room for millions of persons. There is ample ground for introducing persons, but each one of them must be an illustration of the principles. We must not forget that. These principles of our religion are all safe, and it should be the life work of every one of us to keep them safe, and to keep them free from the accumulating dirt and dust of ages. It is strange that in spite of the degradation that seized upon the race again and again, these principles of the Vedanta were never tarnished. No one, however wicked, ever dared to throw dirt upon them. Our scriptures are the best preserved scriptures in the world. Compared 58 The glory of Indian civilization to other books. There have been no interpolations, no text torturing, no destroying of the essence of the thought in them. It is there just as it was first, directing the human mind towards the ideal, the goal. You find that these texts have been commented upon by different commentators, preached by great teachers, and sects founded upon them, and you find that in these books of the Vedas there are various apparently contradictory ideas. There are certain texts which are entirely dualistic, others are entirely monistic. The dualistic commentator, knowing no better, wishes to knock the monistic texts on the head. Preachers and priests want to explain them in the dualistic meaning. The monistic commentator serves the dualistic texts in a similar fashion. Now this is not the fault of the Vedas. It is foolish to attempt to prove that the whole of the Vedas is dualistic. It is equally foolish to attempt to prove that the whole of the Vedas is non-dualistic. They are dualistic and non-dualistic both. We understand them better today in the light of newer ideas. These are but different conceptions leading to the final conclusion that both dualistic and monistic conceptions are necessary for the evolution of the mind, and therefore the Vedas preach them. In mercy to the human race, the Vedas show the various steps to the higher goal. Not that they are contradictory, vain words used by the Vedas to delude children, they are necessary not only for children, but for many a grown-up man. So long as we have a body and so long as we are deluded by the idea of our identity with the body, so long as we have 5 senses and see the external world, we must have a personal God. For if we have all these ideas, we must take, as the great Ramanuj has proved, all the ideas about God and nature and the individualized soul. When you take the one, you have to take the whole triangle. We cannot avoid it. Therefore, as long as you see the external world to avoid a personal God and a personal the work before us 59 soul is errant lunacy. But there may be times in the lives of sages when the human mind transcends as it were its own limitations, when man goes even beyond nature, to the realm of which the Shriti declares, whence words fall back with the mind without reaching it, there the eyes cannot reach nor speech nor mind. We cannot say that we know it, we cannot say that we do not know it. There the human soul transcends all limitations, and then alone flashes into the human soul the conception of monism, I and the whole universe are one, I and Brahman are one. And this conclusion you will find has not only been reached through knowledge and philosophy, but parts of it through the power of love. You read in the Bhagavata, when Krishna disappeared and the Gopis bewailed his disappearance, that at last the thought of Krishna became so prominent in their minds that each one forgot her own body and thought she was Krishna, and began to decorate herself and to play as he did. We understand, therefore, that this identity comes even through love. There was an ancient Persian Sufi poet, and one of his poems says, "I came to the beloved and beheld the door was closed, I knocked at the door and from inside a voice came, 'Who is there?' I replied, 'I am.' The door did not open. A second time I came and knocked at the door and the same voice asked, 'Who is there?' 'I am so and so.' The door did not open. A third time I came and the same voice asked, 'Who is there?' 'I am thyself, my love,' and the door opened." There are, therefore, many stages, and we need not quarrel about them even if there have been quarrels among the ancient commentators, whom all of us ought to revere, for there is no limitation to knowledge, there is no omniscience exclusively the property of any one in ancient or modern times. If there have been sages and rishis in the past, be sure that there will be many now. If there have been Vyasas and Valmikis and Shankaracharya 60 the glory of Indian civilization in ancient times, why may not each one of you become a Shankaracharya? This is another point of our religion that you must always remember, that in all other scriptures inspiration is quoted as their authority, but this inspiration is limited to a very few persons, and through them the truth came to the masses, and we have all to obey them. Truth came to Jesus of Nazareth, and we must all obey him. But the truth came to the rishis of India, the mantradrashtas, the seers of thought, and will come to all rishis in the future, not to talkers, not to book swallowers, not to scholars, not to philologists, but to seers of thought. The self is not to be reached by too much talking, not even by the highest intellects, not even by the study of the scriptures. The scriptures themselves say so. Do you find in any other scripture such a bold assertion as that not even by the study of the Vedas will you reach the Atman? You must open your heart. Religion is not going to church, or putting marks on the forehead, or dressing in a peculiar fashion. You may paint yourselves in all the colors of the rainbow, but if the heart has not been opened, if you have not realized God, it is all vain. If one has the color of the heart, he does not want any external color. That is the true religious realization. We must not forget that colors and all these things are good so far as they help, so far they are all welcome. But they are apt to degenerate, and instead of helping they retard, and a man identifies religion with externalities. Going to the temple becomes tantamount to spiritual life. Giving something to a priest becomes tantamount to religious life. These are dangerous and pernicious, and should be at once checked. Our scriptures declare again and again that even the knowledge of the external senses is not religion. That is religion which makes us realize the unchangeable one, and that is the religion for everyone. He who realizes transcendental truth, he who realizes the Atman in his own nature, he who comes face to face with God, sees God alone in everything, has become a Rishi. And there is the work before us. 61 No religious life for you until you have become a Rishi. Then alone religion begins for you, now is only the preparation. Then religion dawns upon you, now you are only undergoing intellectual gymnastics and physical tortures. We must, therefore, remember that our religion lays down distinctly and clearly that everyone who wants salvation must pass through the stage of Rishihood, must become a mantradrashta, must see God. That is salvation, that is the law laid down by our scriptures. Then it becomes easy to look into the scripture with our own eyes, understand the meaning for ourselves, to analyze just what we want, and to understand the truth for ourselves. This is what has to be done. At the same time, we must pay all reverence to the ancient sages for their work. They were great, these ancients, but we want to be greater. They did great work in the past, but we must do greater work than they. They had hundreds of rishis in ancient India. We will have millions, we are going to have, and the sooner every one of you believes in this, the better for India and the better for the world. Whatever you believe, that you will be. If you believe yourselves to be sages, sages you will be tomorrow. There is nothing to obstruct you. For if there is one common doctrine that runs through all our apparently fighting and contradictory sects, it is that all glory, power, and purity are within the soul already, only according to Ramanuj, the soul contracts and expands at times, and according to Shankara, it comes under a delusion. Never mind these differences. All admit the truth that the power is there, potential or manifested is there, and the sooner you believe that, the better for you. All power is within you, you can do anything and everything. Believe in that, do not believe that you are weak, do not believe that you are half crazy lunatics, as most of us do nowadays. You can do anything and everything without even the guidance of anyone. All power is there. Stand up and express the divinity within you. 62 The Glory of Indian Civilization, the Vedanta, delivered at Lahore on November 12, 1897, two worlds there are in which we live, one the external, the other internal. Human progress has been made, from days of yore, almost in parallel lines along both these worlds. The search began in the external, and man at first wanted to get answers for all the deep problems from outside nature. Man wanted to satisfy his thirst for the beautiful and the sublime from all that surrounded him. He wanted to express himself and all that was within him in the language of the concrete, and grand indeed were the answers he got, most marvelous ideas of God and worship, and most rapturous expressions of the beautiful. Sublime ideas came from the external world indeed. But the other, opening out for humanity later, laid out before him a universe yet sublimer, yet more beautiful, and infinitely more expansive. In the Karmakanda portion of the Vedas, we find the most wonderful ideas of religion inculcated, we find the most wonderful ideas about an overruling creator, preserver, and destroyer of the universe presented before us in language sometimes the most soul-stirring. Most of you perhaps remember that most wonderful shloka in the Rig Veda Samhita where you get the description of chaos, perhaps the sublimest that has ever been attempted yet. In spite of all this, we find it is only a painting of the sublime outside, we find that yet it is gross, that something of matter yet clings to it. Yet we find that it is only the expression of the infinite in the language of matter, in the language of the finite, it is the infinite of the muscles and not of the mind, it is the infinite of space and not of thought. Therefore, in the second portion of Jnanakanda, we the Vedanta 63 find there is altogether a different procedure. The first was a search in external nature for the truths of the universe, it was an attempt to get the solution of the deep problems of life from the material world. Aeaas u trademark Faoas trademark UNFA at whose glory these Himalayas declare. This is a grand idea, but yet it was not grand enough for India. The Indian mind had to fall back, and the research took a different direction altogether. From the external the search came to the internal, from matter to mind. There arose the cry, when a man dies, what becomes of him? Eanasns Aae trademark Auoynz. Some say that he exists, others that he is gone. Say, O King of Death, what is the truth? An entirely different procedure we find here. The Indian mind got all that could be had from the external world, but it did not feel satisfied with that, it wanted to search further, to dive into its own soul, and the final answer came. The Upanishads, or the Vedanta, or the Aranyakas, or Rahasya is the name of this portion of the Vedas. Here we find at once that religion has got rid of all external formalities. Here we find at once that spiritual things are told not in the language of matter, but in the language of the spirit, the superfine in the language of the superfine. No more any grossness attaches to it, no more is there any compromise with things of worldly concern. Bold, brave, beyond the conception of the present day, stand the giant minds of the sages of the Upanishads, declaring the noblest truths that have ever been preached to humanity, without any compromise, without any fear. This, my countrymen, I want to lay before you. Even the Jnanakanda of the Vedas is a vast ocean, many lives are necessary to understand even a little of it. Truly has it been said of the Upanishads by Ramanuj that they form the head, the shoulders, the crest of the Vedas, and surely enough the Upanishads have become the Bible of modern India. The 64 The glory of Indian civilization. Hindus have the greatest respect for the Karma Kanda of the Vedas, but, for all practical purposes, we know that for ages by Shriti has been meant the Upanishads, and the Upanishads alone. We know that all our great philosophers, whether Vyasa, Patanjali, or Gautama, and even the father of all philosophy, the great Kapila himself, whenever they wanted an authority for what they wrote, every one of them found it in the Upanishads, and nowhere else, for therein are the truths that remain forever. There are truths that are true only in a certain line, in a certain direction, under certain circumstances, and for certain times those that are founded on the institutions of the times. There are other truths which are based on the nature of man himself, and which must endure so long as man himself endures. These are the truths that alone can be universal, and in spite of all the changes that have come to India, as to our social surroundings, our methods of dress, our manner of eating, our modes of worship, these universal truths of the Shritis, the marvelous Vedantic ideas, stand out in their own sublimity, immovable, unvanquishable, deathless, and immortal. Yet the germs of all the ideas that were developed in the Upanishads had been taught already in the Karma Kanda. The idea of the cosmos which all sects of Vedantists had to take for granted, the psychology which has formed the common basis of all the Indian schools of thought, had there been worked out already and presented before the world. A few words, therefore, about the Karma Kanda are necessary before we begin the spiritual portion, the Vedanta, and first of all I should like to explain the sense in which I use the word Vedanta. Unfortunately, there is the mistaken notion in modern India that the word Vedanta has reference only to the Advaita system, but you must always remember that in modern India the three prasthanas are considered equally important in the study of all the Vedanta 65 the systems of religion. First of all, there are the revelations, the Shrutis, by which I mean the Upanishads. Secondly, among our philosophies, the sutras of Vyasa have the greatest prominence on account of their being the consummation of all the preceding systems of philosophy. These systems are not contradictory to one another, but one is based on another, and there is a gradual unfolding of the theme which culminates in the sutras of Vyasa. Then, between the Upanishads and the sutras, which are the systematizing of the marvelous truths of the Vedanta, comes in the Gita, the divine commentary of the Vedanta. The Upanishads, the Vyasa Sutras, and the Gita, therefore, have been taken up by every sect in India that wants to claim authority for orthodoxy, whether dualist, or Vishishtadvaitist, or Advaitist. The authorities of each of these are the three prasthanas. We find that a Shankaracharya, or a Ramanuj, or a Madhvacharya, or a Vallabhacharya, or a Chaitanya, anyone who wanted to propound a new sect had to take up these three systems and write only a new commentary on them. Therefore, it would be wrong to confine the word Vedanta only to one system which has arisen out of the Upanishads. All these are covered by the word Vedanta. The Vishishtadvaitist has as much right to be called a Vedantist as the Advaitist. In fact, I will go a little further and say that what we really mean by the word Hindu is really the same as Vedantist. I want you to note that these three systems have been current in India almost from time immemorial, for you must not believe that Shankara was the inventor of the Advaita system. It existed ages before Shankara was born, he was one of its last representatives. So with the Vishishtadvaita system, it had existed ages before Ramanuj appeared, as we already know from the commentaries he has written, so with the dualistic systems that have existed side by side with the others. And with my little knowledge, I have come to the conclusion that they do not contradict each other. 66 The glory of Indian civilization. Just as in the case of the six darshanas, we find they are a gradual unfolding of the grand principles whose music, beginning far back in the soft low notes, ends in the triumphant blast of the Advaita, so also in these three systems we find the gradual working up of the human mind towards higher and higher ideals till everything is merged in that wonderful unity which is reached in the Advaita system. I herefore these three are not contradictory. On the other hand, I am bound to tell you that this has been a mistake committed by not a few. We find that an Advaitist teacher keeps intact those texts which especially teach Advaitism, and tries to interpret the dualistic or qualified non-dualistic texts into his own meaning. Similarly, we find dualistic teachers trying to read their dualistic meaning into Advaitic texts. Our gurus were great men, yet there is a saying, even the faults of a guru must be told. I am of opinion that in this only they were mistaken. We need not go into text torturing, we need not go into any sort of religious dishonesty, we need not go into any sort of grammatical twaddle, we need not go about trying to put our own ideas into texts which were never meant for them, but the work is plain and becomes easier, once you understand the marvelous doctrine of Adhikarabhita. It is true that the Upanishads have this one theme before them, Nua trademark eais faz euphrase afu trademark te euphros fwo at what is that knowing which we know everything else. In modern language, the theme of the Upanishads is to find an ultimate unity of things. Knowledge is nothing but finding unity in the midst of diversity. Every science is based upon this, all human knowledge is based upon the finding of unity in the midst of diversity, and if it is the task of small fragments of human knowledge, which we call our sciences, to find unity in the midst of a few different phenomena, the Vedanta 67 the task becomes stupendous when the theme before us is to find unity in the midst of this marvelously diversified universe, where prevail unnumbered differences in name and form, in matter and spirit, each thought differing from every other thought, each form differing from every other form. Yet, to harmonize these many planes and unending lokas, in the midst of this infinite variety to find unity, is the theme of the Upanishads. On the other hand, the old idea of Arundhati Nyaya applies. To show a man the fine star Arundhati, one takes the big and brilliant nearest to it, upon which he is asked to fix his eyes first, and then it becomes quite easy to direct his sight to Arundhati. This is the task before us, and to prove my idea I have simply to show you the Upanishads, and you will see it. Nearly every chapter begins with dualistic teaching, upasana. God is first taught as someone who is the creator of this universe, its preserver, and unto whom everything goes at last. He is one to be worshipped, the ruler, the guide of nature, external and internal, yet appearing as if he were outside of nature and external. One step further, and we find the same teacher teaching that this God is not outside of nature, but immanent in nature. And at last both ideas are discarded, and whatever is real is he, there is no difference. Of trademark UAE is onzos shvetakatu, that thou art. That immanent one is at last declared to be the same that is in the human soul. Here is no compromise, here is no fear of others' opinions. Truth, bold truth, has been taught in bold language, and we need not fear to preach the truth in the same bold language today, and, by the grace of God, I hope at least to be one who dares to be that bold preacher. To go back to our preliminaries. There are first two things to be understood: one, the psychological aspect common to all the Vedantic schools, and the other, the cosmological aspect. I will first take up the latter. Today we find wonderful discoveries. 68 The glory of Indian civilization of modern science coming upon us like bolts from the blue, opening our eyes to marvels we never dreamt of. But many of these are only rediscoveries of what had been found ages ago. It was only the other day that modern science found that even in the midst of the variety of forces there is unity. It has just discovered that what it calls heat, magnetism, electricity, and so forth, are all convertible into one unit force, and as such, it expresses all these by one name, whatever you may choose to call it. But this has been done even in the Samhita, old and ancient as it is. In it we meet with this very idea of force I was referring to. All the forces, whether you call them gravitation, or attraction, or repulsion, whether expressing themselves as heat, or electricity, or magnetism, are nothing but the variations of that unit energy. Whether they express themselves as thought, reflected from antakarana, the inner organs of man, or as action from an external organ, the unit from which they spring is what is called prana. Again, what is prana? Prana is spandana or vibration. When all this universe shall have resolved back into its primal state, what becomes of this infinite force? Do they think that it becomes extinct? Of course not. If it became extinct, what would be the cause of the next wave, because the motion is going in wave forms, rising, falling, rising again, falling again? Here is the word Shrishti, which expresses the universe. Mark that the word does not mean creation. I am helpless in talking English, I have to translate the Sanskrit words as best as I can. It is Shrishti, projection. At the end of a cycle, everything becomes finer and is resolved back into the primal state from which it sprang, and there it remains for a time quiescent, ready to spring forth again. That is Shrishti, projection. And what becomes of all these forces, the pranas? They are resolved back into the primal prana, and this prana becomes almost motionless, not entirely motionless, and that is what is described in the Vedic Sukta, it vibrated without vibrations anidavatam. There are many technical the Vedanta 69 phrases in the Upanishads difficult to understand. For instance, take this word vata, many times it means air and many times motion, and often people confuse one with the other. We must guard against that. And what becomes of what you call matter? The forces permeate all matter, they all dissolve into akasha, from which they again come out, this akasha is the primal matter. Whether you translate it as ether or anything else, the idea is that this akasha is the primal form of matter. This akasha vibrates under the action of prana, and when the next shrishti is coming up, as the vibration becomes quicker, the akasha is lashed into all these wave forms which we call suns, moons, and systems. We read again, eod_2afeuml_uouaowo trademark omega. Everything in this universe has been projected, prana vibrating. You must mark the word ijati, because it comes from ija to vibrate. Nisridam projected. Yadidam kincha whatever in this universe. This is a part of the cosmological side. There are many details working into it. For instance, how the process takes place, how there is first ether, and how from the ether come other things, how that ether begins to vibrate, and from that vaya comes. But the one idea is here that it is from the finer that the grosser has come. Gross matter is the last to emerge and the most external, and this gross matter had the finer matter before it. Yet we see that the whole thing has been resolved into two, but there is not yet a final unity. There is the unity of force, prana, there is the unity of matter, called akasha. Is there any unity to be found among them again? Can they be melted into one? Our modern science is mute here, it has not yet found its way out, and if it is doing so, just as it has been slowly finding the same old prana and the same ancient akasha, it will have to move along the same lines. 70 The glory of Indian civilization. The next unity is the omnipresent impersonal being known by its old mythological name as Brahma, the four-headed Brahma, and psychologically called Maha. This is where the two unite. What is called your mind is only a bit of this Maha caught in the trap of the brain, and the sum total of all minds caught in the meshes of brains is what you call samashti, the aggregate, the universal. Analysis had to go further, it was not yet complete. Here we were, each one of us, as it were, a microcosm, and the world taken all together is the macrocosm. But whatever is in the vyashti, the particular, we may safely conjecture that a similar thing is happening also outside. If we had the power to analyze our own minds, we might safely conjecture that the same thing is happening in the cosmic mind. What is this mind is the question. In modern times, in Western countries, as physical science is making rapid progress, as physiology is step by step conquering stronghold after stronghold of old religions, the Western people do not know where to stand, because to their great despair, modern physiology at every step has identified the mind with the brain. But we in India have known that always. That is the first proposition the Hindu boy learns, that the mind is matter, only finer. The body is gross, and behind the body is what we call the Sukshma Sharira, the fine body, or mind. This is also material, only finer, and it is not the Atman. I will not translate this word to you in English, because the idea does not exist in Europe, it is untranslatable. The modern attempt of German philosophers is to translate the word Atman by the word self, and until that word is universally accepted, it is impossible to use it. So, call it as self or anything, it is our Atman. This Atman is the real man behind. It is the Atman that uses the material mind as its instrument, its antaharana, as is the psychological term for the mind. And the mind by means of a series of internal organs works the visible organs of the body. The Vedanta 71. What is this mind? It was only the other day that Western philosophers have come to know that the eyes are not the real organs of vision, but that behind these are other organs, the Indriyas, and if these are destroyed, a man may have 1,000 eyes, like Indra, but there will be no sight for him. Your philosophy starts with this assumption that by vision is not meant the external vision. The real vision belongs to the internal organs, the brain centers inside. You may call them what you like, but it is not that the Indriyas are the eyes, or the nose, or the ears. And the sum total of all these Indriyas plus the manas, buddhi, chit, ahamkara, etc., is what is called the mind. And if the modern physiologist comes to tell you that the brain is what is called the mind, and that the brain is formed of so many organs, you need not be afraid at all. Tell him that your philosophers knew it always, it is one of the very first principles of your religion. Well then, we have to understand now what is meant by this manas, buddhi, chit, ahamkara, etc. First of all, let us take chit. It is the mind stuff, a part of the Maha. It is the generic name for the mind itself, including all its various states. Suppose on a summer evening, there is a lake, smooth and calm, without a ripple on its surface. And suppose someone throws a stone into this lake. What happens? First there is the action, the blow given to the water, next the water rises and sends a reaction towards the stone, and that reaction takes the form of a wave. First the water vibrates a little, and immediately sends back a reaction in the form of a wave. The chit let us compare to this lake, and the external objects are like the stones thrown into it. As soon as it comes in contact with any external object by means of these Indriyas, the Indriyas must be there to carry these external objects inside. There is a vibration, what is called manas, indecisive. Next there is a reaction, the determinative faculty, buddhi, and along with this buddhi flashes the idea of 72, the glory of Indian civilization, aham, and the external object. Suppose there is a mosquito sitting upon my hand. This sensation is carried to my chit and it vibrates a little, this is the psychological manas. Then there is a reaction, and immediately comes the idea that I have a mosquito on my hand and that I shall have to drive it off. Thus these stones are thrown into the lake, but in the case of the lake every blow that comes to it is from the external world, while in the case of the lake of the mind, the blows may either come from the external world or the internal world. This whose series is what is called the antaharana. Along with it, you ought to understand one thing more that will help us in understanding the Advaita system later on. It is this. All of you must have seen pearls, and most of you know how pearls are formed. A grain of sand enters into the shell of a pearl oyster, and sets up an irritation there, and the oyster's body reacts towards the irritation and covers the little particle with its own juice. That crystal leases and forms the pearl. So the whole universe is like that, it is the pearl which is being formed by us. What we get from the external world is simply the blow. Even to be conscious of that blow we have to react, and as soon as we react, we really project a portion of our own mind towards the blow, and when we come to know of it, it is really our own mind as it has been shaped by the blow. Therefore it is clear even to those who want to believe in a hard and fast realism of an external world, which they cannot but admit in these days of physiology, that supposing we represent the external world by X, what we really know is X plus mind, and this mind element is so great that it has covered the whole of that X which has remained unknown and unknowable throughout, and, therefore, if there is an external world, it is always unknown and unknowable. What we know of it is as it is molded, formed, fashioned by our own mind. So with the internal world. The same applies to our own, the Vedanta 73 soul, the Atman. In order to know the Atman, we shall have to know it through the mind, and, therefore, what little Eve know of this Atman is simply the Atman plus the mind. That is to say, the Atman covered over, fashioned and molded by the mind, and nothing more. We shall return to this a little later, but we will remember what has been told here. The next thing to understand is this. The question arose that this body is the name of one continuous stream of matter. Every moment we are adding material to it, and every moment material is being thrown off by it like a river continually flowing, vast masses of water always changing places, yet all the same, we take up the whole thing in imagination, and call it the same river. What do we call the river? Every moment the water is changing, the shore is changing, every moment the environment is changing. What is the river then? It is the name of the series of changes. So with the mind. That is the great Kshanika Vijnana Veda doctrine, most difficult to understand, but most rigorously and logically worked out in the Buddhistic philosophy, and this arose in India in opposition to some part of the Vedanta. That had to be answered, and we shall see later on how it could only be answered by Advaitism and by nothing else. We will see also how, in spite of people's curious notions about Advaitism, people's fright about Advaitism, it is the salvation of the world, because therein alone is to be found the reason of things. Dualism and other isms are very good as means of worship, very satisfying to the mind, and maybe, they have helped the mind onward, but if man wants to be rational and religious at the same time, Advaita is the one system in the world for him. Well, now, we shall regard the mind as a similar river, continually filling itself at one end and emptying itself at the other end. Where is that unity which we call the Atman? The idea is this, that in spite of this continuous change in the body, and in spite of this continuous 74 the glory of Indian civilization change in the mind, there is in us something that is unchangeable, which makes our ideas of things appear unchangeable. When rays of light coming from different quarters fall upon a screen, or a wall, or upon something that is not changeable, then and then alone it is possible for them to form a unity, then and then alone it is possible for them to form one complete whole. Where is this unity in the human organs, falling upon which, as it were, the various ideas will come to unity and become one complete whole? This certainly cannot be the mind itself, seeing that it also changes. Therefore, there must be something which is neither the body nor the mind, something which changes not, something permanent, upon which all our ideas, our sensations fall to form a unity and a complete whole, and this is the real soul, the Atman of man. And seeing that everything material, whether you call it fine matter, or mind, must be changeful, seeing that what you call gross matter, the external world, must also be changeful in comparison to that, this unchangeable something cannot be of material substance, therefore, it is spiritual, that is to say, it is not matter, it is indestructible, unchangeable. Next will come another question, apart from those old arguments which only rise in the external world, the arguments in support of design: who created this external world, who created matter, etc. The idea here is to know truth only from the inner nature of man, and the question arises just in the same way as it arose about the soul. Taking for granted that there is a soul, unchangeable, in each man, which is neither the mind nor the body, there is still a unity of idea among the souls, a unity of feeling, of sympathy. How is it possible that my soul can act upon your soul? Where is the medium through which it can work? Where is the medium through which it can act? How is it I can feel anything about your souls? What is it that is in touch both with your soul and with my soul? Therefore, there is the Vedanta 75 metaphysical necessity of admitting another soul, for it must be a soul which acts in contact all the different souls, and in and through matter one soul which covers and interpenetrates all the infinite number of souls in the world, in and through which they live, in and through which they sympathize, and love, and work for one another. And this universal soul is Paramatman, the Lord God of the universe. Again, it follows that because the soul is not made of matter, since it is spiritual, it cannot obey the laws of matter, it cannot be judged by the laws of matter. It is, therefore, unconquerable, birthless, deathless, and changeless. Aaeosituao maaetuoufnat ayaemzt a delta a with acute zaeuo trademark ao at uani, af2, as my indefinite integral y is die aaoa at this self, weapons cannot pierce, nor fire can burn, water cannot wet, nor air can dry up. Changless, all-pervading, unmoving, immovable, eternal is the self of man. We learn according to the Gita and the Vedanta that this individual self is also Vibhu, and according to Kapila, is omnipresent. Of course there are sects in India which hold that the self is Anu, infinitely small, but what they mean is Anu in manifestation, its real nature is Vibhu, all-pervading. There comes another idea, startling perhaps, yet a characteristically Indian idea, and if there is any idea that is common to all our sects, it is this. Therefore, I beg you to pay attention to this one idea and to remember it, for this is the very foundation of everything that we have in India. The idea is this. You have heard of the doctrine of physical evolution preached in the Western world by the German and the English savants. It tells us that the bodies of the different animals are really one, the differences that we see are but different expressions of the same 76. The glory of Indian civilization series, that from the lowest worm to the highest and the most saintly man it is but one, the one changing into the other, and so on, going up and up, higher and higher, until it attains perfection. We had that idea also. Declares our yogi Patanjali /Aniao indefinite integral uu indefinite integral ma trademark, Unnao indefinite integral a with acute o omega 1 species. The jati is species changes into another species evolution. Parinama means one thing changing into another, just as one species changes into another. Where do we differ from the Europeans? Patanjali says, Prakriti Purat, by the infilling of nature. The European says, it is competition, natural and sexual selection, etc. that forces one body to take the form of another. But here is another idea, a still better analysis, going deeper into the thing and saying, by the infilling of nature. What is meant by this infilling of nature? We admit that the amoeba goes higher and higher until it becomes a Buddha, we admit that, but we are at the same time as much certain that you cannot get an amount of work out of a machine unless you have put it in some shape or other. The sum total of the energy remains the same, whatever the forms it may take. If you want a mass of energy at one end, you have got to put it in at the other end. It may be in another form, but the amount of energy that should be produced out of it must be the same. Therefore, if a Buddha is the one end of the change, the very amoeba must have been the Buddha also. If the Buddha is the evolved amoeba, the amoeba was the involved Buddha also. If this universe is the manifestation of an almost infinite amount of energy, when this universe was in a state of pralaya, it must have represented the same amount of involved energy. It cannot have been otherwise. As such, it follows that every soul is infinite. From the lowest worm that crawls under our feet to the noblest and greatest saints, all have this infinite power, infinite purity, and infinite everything. Only the difference is in the degree of manifestation. The worm is only manifesting just a little bit of that energy. You have the Vedanta 77 manifested more, another God-man has manifested still more, that is all the difference. But that infinite power is there all the same. Says Patanjali, QZNO omega, like the peasant irrigating his field. Through a little corner of his field he brings water from a reservoir somewhere, and perhaps he has got a little lock that prevents the water from rushing into his field. When he wants water, he has simply to open the lock, and in rushes the water of its own power. The power has not to be added, it is already there in the reservoir. So every one of us, every being, has as his own background such a reservoir of strength, infinite power, infinite purity, infinite bliss, and existence infinite. Only these locks, these bodies, are hindering us from expressing what we really are to the fullest. And as these bodies become more and more finely organized, as the tamoguna becomes the rajaguna, and as the rajaguna becomes sattvaguna, more and more of this power and purity becomes manifest, and therefore it is that our people have been so careful about eating and drinking, and the food question. It may be that the original ideas have been lost, just as with our marriage which, though not belonging to the subject, I may take as an example. If I have another opportunity, I will talk to you about these, but let me tell you now that the ideas behind our marriage system are the only ideas through which there can be a real civilization. There cannot be anything else. If a man or a woman were allowed the freedom to take up any woman or man as wife or husband, if individual pleasure, satisfaction of animal instincts, were to be allowed to run loose in society, the result must be evil, evil children, wicked and demoniacal. Man in every country is, on the one hand, producing these brutal children, and on the other hand multiplying the police force to keep these brutes down. The question is not how to destroy evil that way, but how to prevent the very birth of evil. And so long as you live 78 the glory of Indian civilization in society, your marriage certainly affects every member of it, and therefore society has the right to dictate whom you shall marry, and whom you shall not. And great ideas of this kind have been behind the system of marriage here, what they call the astrological jati of the bride and bridegroom. And in passing I may remark that according to Manu a child who is born of lust is not an Aryan. The child whose very conception and whose death is according to the rules of the Vedas, such is an Aryan. Yes, and less of these Aryan children are being produced in every country, and the result is the mass of evil which we call Kali Yuga. But we have lost all these ideals. It is true we cannot carry all these ideas to the fullest length now. It is perfectly true we have made almost a caricature of some of these great ideas. It is lamentably true that the fathers and mothers are not what they were in old times, neither is society so educated as it used to be, neither has society that love for individuals that it used to have. But, however faulty the working out may be, the principle is sound, and if its application has become defective, if one method has failed, take up the principle and work it out better. Why kill the principle? The same applies to the food question. The work and details are bad, very bad indeed, but that does not hurt the principle. The principle is eternal and must be there. Work it out afresh and make a reformed application. This is the orate great idea of the Atman which every one of our sects in India has to believe. Only, as we shall find, the dualists preach that this Atman by evil works becomes Sankakata, i.e. all its powers and its nature become contracted, and by good works again that nature expands. And the Advaitist says that the Atman never expands nor contracts, but seems to do so. It appears to have become contracted. That is all the difference, but all have the one idea that our Atman has all the powers already, not that anything will come to it from outside, not that anything the Vedanta 79 will drop into it from the skies. Mark you, your Vedas are not inspired, but expired, not that they came from anywhere outside, but they are the eternal laws living in every soul. The Vedas are in the soul of the ant, in the soul of the god. The ant has only to evolve and get the body of a sage or a Rishi, and the Vedas will come out, eternal laws expressing themselves. This is the one great idea to understand, that our power is already ours, our salvation is already within us. Say either that it has become contracted, or say that it has been covered with the veil of Maya, it matters little, the idea is there already. You must have to believe in that, believe in the possibility of everybody, that even in the lowest man there is the same possibility as in the Buddha. This is the doctrine of the Atman. But now comes a tremendous fight. Here are the Buddhists, who equally analyze the body into a material stream and as equally analyze the mind into another. And as for this Atman, they state that it is unnecessary, so we need not assume the Atman at all. What use of a substance, and qualities adhering to the substance? We say gunas, qualities, and qualities alone. It is illogical to assume two causes where one will explain the whole thing. And the fight went on, and all the theories which held the doctrine of substance were thrown to the ground by the Buddhists. There was a break-up all along the line of those who held on to the doctrine of substance and qualities, that you have a soul, and I have a soul, and everyone has a soul separate from the mind and body, and that each one is an individual. So far we have seen that the idea of dualism is all right, for there is the body, there is then the fine body, the mind, there is this Atman, and in and through all the Atmans is that Paramatman, God. The difficulty is here that this Atman and Paramatman are both called substance, to which the mind and body and so-called substances adhere like so many qualities. 80. The glory of Indian civilization. Nobody has ever seen a substance, none can ever conceive. What is the use of thinking of this substance? Why not become a Kavadan and say that whatever exists is the succession of mental currents and nothing more? They do not adhere to each other, they do not form a unit, one is chasing the other, like waves in the ocean, never complete, never forming one unit whole. Man is a succession of waves, and when one goes away it generates another, and the cessation of these wave forms is what is called nirvana. You see that dualism is mute before this, it is impossible that it can bring up any argument, and the dualistic God also cannot be retained here. The idea of a God that is omnipresent, and yet is a person who creates without hands, and moves without feet, and so on, and who has created the universe as a Kumbakonam, potter, creates a Gita, pot, the Buddhist declares, is childish, and that if this is God, he is going to fight this God and not worship it. This universe is full of misery, if it is the work of a God, we are going to fight this God. And secondly, this God is illogical and impossible, as all of you are aware. We need not go into the defects of the design theory, as all Archanikas have shown them full well, and so this personal God fell to pieces. Truth, and nothing but truth, is the watchword of the Advaitist. Ani trademark ZF /Yaz Eawo at Anazayu Asayafuoistsfiata, truth alone triumphs, and not untruth. Through truth alone the way to God's Devayana lies. Everybody marches forward under that banner, but it is only to crush the weaker man's position by his own. You come with your dualistic idea of God to pick a quarrel with a poor man who is worshipping an image, and you think you are wonderfully rational, you can confound him, but if he turns round and shatters your own personal God and calls that an imaginary ideal, where are you? You fall back on faith and so on, or raise the Vedanta 81, the cry of atheism, the old cry of a weak man: whosoever defeats him is an atheist. If you are to be rational all along the line, and if not, allow others the same privilege which you ask for yourselves. How can you prove the existence of this God? On the other hand, it can be almost disproved. There is not a shadow of a proof as to his existence, and there are very strong arguments to the contrary. How will you prove his existence, with your God, and his gunness, and an infinite number of souls which are substance, and each soul an individual? In what are you an individual? You are not as a body, for you know today better than even the Buddhists of old knew that what may have been matter in the sun has just now become matter in you, and will go out and become matter in the plants. Then where is your individuality, Mr. So-and-so? The same applies to the mind. Where is your individuality? You have one thought tonight and another tomorrow. You do not think the same way as you thought when you were a child, and old men do not think the same way as they did when they were young. Where is your individuality then? Do not say it is in consciousness, this ahamkara, because this only covers a small part of your existence. While I am talking to you, all my organs are working and I am not conscious of it. If consciousness is the proof of existence, they do not exist then, because I am not conscious of them. Where are you then with your personal God theories? How can you prove such a God? Again, the Buddhists will stand up and declare not only is it illogical, but immoral, for it teaches man to be a coward and to seek assistance outside, and nobody can give him such help. Here is the universe, man made it, why then depend on an imaginary being outside whom nobody ever saw or felt or got help from? Why then do you make cowards of yourselves and teach your children that the highest state of man is to be like a dog, and go crawling before this imaginary being, saying that 82 the glory of Indian civilization you are weak and impure, and that you are everything vile in this universe? On the other hand, the Buddhists may urge not only that you tell a lie, but that you bring a tremendous amount of evil upon your children, for, mark you, this world is one of hypnotization. Whatever you tell yourself, that you become. Almost the first words the great Buddha uttered were, what you think, that you are, what you will think, that you will be. If this is true, do not teach yourself that you are nothing, that you cannot do anything unless you are helped by somebody who does not live here, but sits above the clouds. The result will be that you will be more and more weakened every day. By constantly repeating, we are very impure, Lord, make us pure, the result will be that you will hypnotize yourselves into all sorts of vices. The Buddhists say that 90% of these vices that you see in every society are on account of this idea of a personal God. This is an awful idea of the human being, that the end and aim of this expression of life, this wonderful expression of life, is to become like a dog. Says the Buddhist to the Vaishnava, if your ideal, your aim and goal is to go to the place called Vaikuntha where God lives, and there stand before him with folded hands all through eternity, it is better to commit suicide than do that. The Buddhists may even urge that is why he is going to create annihilation, nirvana, to escape this. I am putting these ideas before you as a Buddhist just for the time being, because nowadays all these Advaitic ideas are said to make you immoral, and I am trying to tell you how the other side looks. Let us face both sides boldly and bravely. We have seen first of all that this cannot be proved. This idea of a personal God creating the world, is there any child that can believe this today? Because a Kumbhakara creates a Gita, therefore a God created the world. If this is so, then your Kumbhakara is God also, and if anyone tells you that he acts the Vedanta 83 without head and hands, you may take him to a lunatic asylum. Has ever your personal God, the creator of the world to whom you cry all your life, helped you? Is the next challenge from modern science. They will prove that any help you have had could have been got by your own exertions, and better still, you need not have spent your energy in that crying, you could have done it better without that weeping and crying. And we have seen that along with this idea of a personal God comes tyranny and priestcraft. Tyranny and priestcraft have prevailed wherever this idea existed, and until the lie is knocked on the head, say the Buddhists, tyranny will not cease. So long as man thinks he has to cower before a supernatural being, so long there will be priests to claim rights and privileges and to make men cower before them, while these poor men will continue to ask some priest to act as interceder for them. You may do away with the Brahmin, but mark me, those who do so will put themselves in his place and will be worse, because the Brahmin has a certain amount of generosity in him, but these upstarts are always the worst of tyrannizers. If a beggar gets wealth, he thinks the whole world is a bit of straw. So these priests there must be, so long as this personal God idea persists, and it will be impossible to think of any great morality in society. Priestcraft and tyranny go hand in hand. Why was it invented? Because some strong men in old times got people into their hands and said, you must obey us or we will destroy you. That was the long and short of it. Trademark UAEEF / IO trademark Omega. It is the idea of the thunderer who kills everyone who does not obey him. Next the Buddhist says, you have been perfectly rational up to this point, that everything is the result of the law of karma. You believe in an infinity of souls, and that souls are without birth or death, and this infinity of souls and the belief in the law of karma are perfectly logical, no doubt. There cannot be a cause 80 for the glory of Indian civilization without an effect. The present must have had its cause in the past and will have its effect in the future. The Hindu says the karma is jada, inert, and not chaitanya, spirit, therefore some chaitanya is necessary to bring this cause to fruition. Is it so, that chaitanya is necessary to bring the plant to fruition? If I plant the seed and add water, no chaitanya is necessary. You may say there was some original chaitanya there, but the souls themselves were the chaitanya, nothing else is necessary. If human souls have it too, what necessity is there for a God, as say the Jains, who, unlike the Buddhists, believe in souls and do not believe in God? Where are you logical, Where are you moral? And when you criticize Advaitism and fear that it will make for immorality, just read a little of what has been done in India by dualistic sects. If there have been 20,000 Advaitist blackguards, there have also been 20,000 Dvaitist blackguards. Generally speaking, there will be more Dvaitist blackguards, because it takes a better type of mind to understand Advaitism, and Advaitists can scarcely be frightened into anything. What remains for you Hindus, then? There is no help for you out of the clutches of the Buddhists. You may quote the Vedas, but he does not believe in them. He will say, my Tripitakas say otherwise, and they are without beginning or end, not even written by Buddha, for Buddha says he is only reciting them, they are eternal. And he adds, yours are wrong, ours are the true Vedas, yours are manufactured by the Brahmin priests, therefore out with them. How do you escape? Here is the way to get out. Take up the first objection, the metaphysical one, that substance and qualities are different. Says the Advaitist, they are not. There is no difference between substance and qualities. You know the old illustration, how the rope is taken for the snake, and when you see the snake you do not see the rope at all, the rope has vanished. Dividing the thing the Vedanta 85 into substance and quality is a metaphysical something in the brains of philosophers, for never can they be in effect outside. You see qualities if you are an ordinary man, and substance if you are a great yogi, but you never see both at the same time. So, Buddhists, your quarrel about substance and qualities has been but a miscalculation which does not stand on fact. But if substance is unqualified, there can only be one. If you take qualities off from the soul, and show that these qualities are in the mind really, superimposed on the soul, then there can never be two souls, for it is qualification that makes the difference between one soul and another. How do you know that one soul is different from the other? Owing to certain differentiating marks, certain qualities. And where qualities do not exist, how can there be differentiation? Therefore, there are not two souls, there is but one, and your Paramatman is unnecessary, it is this very soul. That one is called Paramatman, that very one is called Jivatman, and so on, and you dualists, such as the Sankhya's and others, who say that the soul is Vibhu, omnipresent, how can you make two infinities? There can be only one. What else? This one is the one infinite Atman, everything else is its manifestation. There the Buddhist stops, but there it does not end. The Advaitist position is not merely a weak one of criticism. The Advaitist criticizes others when they come too near him, and just throws them away, that is all, but he propounds his own position. He is the only one that criticizes, and does not stop with criticism and showing books. Here you are. You say the universe is a thing of continuous motion. In Vyashti, the finite, everything is moving, you are moving, the table is moving, motion everywhere, it is samsara, continuous motion, it is jagat. Therefore, there cannot be an individuality in this jagat, because individuality means that which does not change, there cannot be any changeful individuality, it is a contradiction in terms. There 86 The glory of Indian civilization is no such thing as individuality in this little world of ours, the jagat. Thought and feeling, mind and body, men and animals and plants are in a continuous state of flux. But suppose you take the universe as a unit whole, can it change or move? Certainly not. Motion is possible in comparison with something which is a little less in motion or entirely motionless. The universe as a whole, therefore, is motionless, unchangeable. You are therefore, an individual then and then alone when you are the whole of it, when the realization of I am the universe comes. That is why the Vedantist says that so long as there are two, fear does not cease. It is only when one does not see another, does not feel another, when it is all one then alone fear ceases, then alone death vanishes, then alone samsara vanishes. Advaita teaches us, therefore, that man is individual in being universal, and not in being particular. You are immortal only when you are the whole. You are fearless and deathless only when you are the universe, and then that which you call the universe is the same as that you call God, the same that you call existence, the same that you call the whole. It is the one undivided existence which is taken to be the manifold world which we see, as also others who are in the same state of mind as we. People who have done a little better karma and get a better state of mind, when they die, look upon it as Svarga and see Indras and so forth. People still higher will see it, the very same thing, as Brahmaloka, and the perfect ones will neither see the earth nor the heavens, nor any loka at all. The universe will have vanished, and Brahman will be in its stead. Can we know this Brahman? I have told you of the painting of the infinite in the Samhita. Here we shall find another side shown, the infinite internal. That was the infinite of the muscles. Here we shall have the infinite of thought. There the infinite was attempted to be painted in language positive, here that language failed and the attempt has been to paint it in language negative. The Vedanta 87 here is this universe, and even admitting that it is Brahman, can we know it? No. No. You must understand this one thing again very clearly. Again and again this doubt will come to you, if this is Brahman, how can we know it? Yufro indefinite integral trademark indefinite integral z and zauf / yo by what can the knower be known? How can the knower be known? The eyes see everything, can they see themselves? They cannot, the very fact of knowledge is a degradation. Children of the Aryans, you must remember this, for herein lies a big story. All the Western temptations that come to you, have their metaphysical basis on that one thing: there is nothing higher than sense knowledge. In the East, we say in our Vedas that this knowledge is lower than the thing itself, because it is always a limitation. When you want to know a thing, it immediately becomes limited by your mind. They say, refer back to that instance of the oyster making a pearl and see how knowledge is limitation, gathering a thing, bringing it into consciousness, and not knowing it as a whole. This is true about all knowledge, and can it be less so about the infinite? Can you thus limit him who is the substance of all knowledge, him who is the Sakshi, the witness, without whom you cannot have any knowledge, him who has no qualities, who is the witness of the whole universe, the witness in our own souls? How can you know him? By what means can you bind him up? Everything, the whole universe, is such a false attempt. This infinite Atman is, as it were, trying to see his own face, and all, from the lowest animals to the highest of gods, are like so many mirrors to reflect himself in, and he is taking up still others, finding them insufficient, until in the human body he comes to know that it is the finite of the finite, all is finite, there cannot be any expression of the infinite in the finite. 88 The glory of Indian civilization. Then comes the retrograde march, and this is what is called renunciation, vairagya. Back from the senses, back. Do not go to the senses is the watchword of vairagya. This is the watchword of all morality, this is the watchword of all well-being, for you must remember that with us the universe begins in tapasya, in renunciation, and as you go back and back, all the forms are being manifested before you, and they are left aside one after the other until you remain what you really are. This is moksha or liberation. This idea we have to understand. Yufro indefinite integral trademark indefinite integral z and zauf / yo. How to know the knower. The knower cannot be known, because if it were known, it will not be the knower. If you look at your eyes in a mirror, the reflection is no more your eyes, but something else, only a reflection. Then if this soul, this universal, infinite being which you are, is only a witness, what good is it? It cannot live, and move about, and enjoy the world, as we do. People cannot understand how the witness can enjoy. Oh, they say, you Hindus have become quiescent, and good for nothing, through this doctrine that you are witnesses. First of all, it is only the witness that can enjoy. If there is a wrestling match, who enjoys it, those who take part in it, or those who are looking on, the outsiders? The more and more you are the witness of anything in life, the more you enjoy it. And this is Ananda, and, therefore, infinite bliss can only be yours when you have become the witness of this universe, then alone you are a Mukta Purusha. It is the witness alone that can work without any desire, without any idea of going to heaven, without any idea of blame, without any idea of praise. The witness alone enjoys, and none else. Coming to the moral aspect, there is one thing between the metaphysical and the moral aspect of Advaitism, it is the theory of Maya. Every one of these points in the Advaita system requires the Vedanta 89 years to understand and months to explain. Therefore, you will excuse me if I only just touch them en passant. This theory of Maya has been the most difficult thing to understand in all ages. Let me tell you in a few words that it is surely no theory, it is the combination of the three ideas Deshakalanimita space, time, and causation, and this time and space and cause have been further reduced into Namarupa. Suppose there is a wave in the ocean. The wave is distinct from the ocean only in its form and name, and this form and this name cannot have any separate existence from the wave, they exist only with the wave. The wave may subside, but the same amount of water remains, even if the name and form that were on the wave vanish forever. So this Maya is what makes the difference between me and you, between all animals and man, between gods and men. In fact, it is this Maya that causes the Atman to be caught, as it were, in so many millions of beings, and these are distinguishable only through name and form. If you leave it alone, let name and form go, all this variety vanishes forever, and you are what you really are. This is Maya. It is again no theory, but a statement of facts. When the realist states that this table exists, what he means is, that this table has an independent existence of its own, that it does not depend on the existence of anything else in the universe, and if this whole universe be destroyed and annihilated, this table will remain just as it is now. A little thought will show you that it cannot be so. Everything here in the sense world is dependent and interdependent, relative and correlative, the existence of one depending on the other. There are three steps, therefore, in our knowledge of things. The first is that each thing is individual and separate from every other, and the next step is to find that there is a relation and correlation between all things, and the third is that there is only one thing which we see as many. The first idea 90 The glory of Indian civilization of God with the ignorant is that this God is somewhere outside the universe, that is to say, the conception of God is extremely human, he does just what a man does, only on a bigger and higher scale. And we have seen how that idea of God is proved in a few words to be unreasonable and insufficient. And the next idea is the idea of a power we see manifested everywhere. This is the real personal God we get in the Chandi, but, mark me, not a God that you make the reservoir of all good qualities only. You cannot have two gods, God and Satan, you must have only one and dare to call him good and bad. Have only one and take the logical consequences. We read in the Chandi, we salute thee, O Divine Mother, who lives in every being as peace. We salute thee, O Divine Mother, who lives in all beings as purity. At the same time, we must take the whole consequence of calling him the all-formed. All this is bliss, O Gargi, wherever there is bliss there is a portion of the divine, you may use it how you like. In this light before me, you may give a poor man 100 rupees, and another man may forge your name, but the light will be the same for both. This is the second stage. And the third is that God is neither outside nature nor inside nature, but God, and nature and soul and universe are all convertible terms. You never see two things, it is your metaphysical words that have deluded you. You assume that you are a body and have a soul, and that you are both together. How can that be? Try in your own mind. If there is a yogi among you, he knows himself as Chaitanya, for him the body has vanished. An ordinary man thinks of himself as a body, the idea of spirit has vanished from him, but because the metaphysical ideas exist that man has a body and a soul and all these things, you think they are all simultaneously there. One thing at a time. Do not talk of God when you see matter, you see the effect and the effect alone, and the cause you cannot see, and the moment you can see the cause, the effect will have vanished. The Vedanta 91. Where is the world then, and who has taken it off? One that is present always as consciousness, the bliss absolute, beyond all bounds, beyond all compare, beyond all qualities, ever free, limitless as the sky, without parts, the absolute, the perfect such a Brahman, O sage, O learned one, shines in the heart of the Jnani in Samadhi. Vivekananda, 408. Where all the changes of nature cease forever, who is thought beyond all thoughts, who is equal to all yet having no equal, immeasurable, whom Vedas declare, who is the essence in what we call our existence, the perfect such a Brahman, O sage, O learned one, shines in the heart of the Jnani in Samadhi. Ibid. 409, beyond all birth and death, the infinite one, incomparable, like the whole universe deluged in water in Mahapralaya, water above, water beneath, water on all sides, and on the face of that water not a wave, not a ripple, silent and calm, all visions have died out, all fights and quarrels and the war of fools and saints have ceased forever. Such a Brahman, O sage, O learned one, shines in the heart of the Jnani in Samadhi. Ibid. 410, that also comes, and when that comes the world has vanished. We have seen then that this Brahman, this reality is unknown and unknowable, not in the sense of the agnostic, but because to know him would be a blasphemy, because you are he already. We have also seen that this Brahman is not this table and yet is this table. Take off the name and form, and whatever is reality is he. He is the reality in everything. Thou art the woman, thou the man, thou art the boy, and the girl as well, thou the old man supporting thyself on a stick, thou art all in the universe. That is the theme of Advaitism. 92. The glory of Indian civilization. A few words more. Herein lies, we find, the explanation of the essence of things. We have seen how here alone we can take a firm stand against all the onrush of logic and scientific knowledge. Here at last reason has a firm foundation, and, at the same time, the Indian Vedantist does not curse the preceding steps, he looks back and he blesses them, and he knows that they were true, only wrongly perceived, and wrongly stated. They were the same truth, only seen through the glass of Maya, distorted it may be yet truth, and nothing but truth. The same God whom the ignorant man saw outside nature, the same whom the little, knowing man saw as interpenetrating the universe, and the same whom the sage realizes as his own self, as the whole universe itself, all are one and the same being, the same entity seen from different standpoints, seen through different glasses of Maya, perceived by different minds, and all the difference was caused by that. Not only so, but one view must lead to the other. What is the difference between science and common knowledge? Go out into the streets in the dark, and if something unusual is happening there, ask one of the passers-by what is the cause of it. If is 10 to 1 that he will tell you it is a ghost causing the phenomenon. He is always going after ghosts and spirits outside, because it is the nature of ignorance to seek for causes outside of effects. If a stone falls, it has been thrown by a devil or a ghost, says the ignorant man, but the scientific man says it is the law of nature, the law of gravitation. What is the fight between science and religion everywhere? Religions are encumbered with such a mass of explanations which come from outside. One angel is in charge of the sun, another of the moon, and so on ad infinitum. Every change is caused by a spirit, the one common point of agreement being that they are all outside the thing. Science means that the cause of a thing is sought out by the nature of the thing itself. As step-by-step science, the Vedanta 93 is progressing, it has taken the explanation of natural phenomena out of the hands of spirits and angels. Because Advaitism has done likewise in spiritual matters, it is the most scientific religion. This universe has not been created by any extra-cosmic god, nor is it the work of any outside genius. It is self-creating, self-dissolving, self-manifesting, one infinite existence, the Brahman. Tatvamasi Shvetakito, that thou art. O Shvetakatu. Thus you see that this, and this alone, and none else, can be the only scientific religion. And with all the prattle about science that is going on daily at the present time in modern half-educated India, with all the talk about rationalism and reason that I hear every day, I expect that whole sects of you will come over and dare to be Advaitists, and dare to preach it to the world in the words of Buddha, I/auoaei/ai for the good of many, for the happiness of many. If you do not, I take you for cowards. If you cannot get over your cowardice, if your fear is your excuse, allow the same liberty to others. Do not try to break up the poor idol worshipper, do not call him a devil, do not go about preaching to every man that does not agree entirely with you. Know first, that you are cowards yourselves, and if society frightens you, if your own superstitions of the past frighten you so much, how much more will these superstitions frighten and bind down those who are ignorant? That is the Advaita position. Have mercy on others. Would to God that the whole world were Advaitists tomorrow, not only in theory, but in realization. But if that cannot be, let us do the next best thing, let us take the ignorant by the band, lead them always step by step just as they can go, and know that every step in all religious growth in India has been progressive. It is not from bad to good, but from good to better. 90 For the glory of Indian civilization, something more has to be told about the moral relation. Our boys blithely talk nowadays, they learn from somebody the Lord knows from whom that Advaita makes people immoral, because if we are all one and all God, what need of morality will there be at all? In the first place, that is the argument of the brute, who can only be kept down by the whip. If you are such brutes, commit suicide rather than pass for human beings who have to be kept down by the whip. If the whip is taken away, you will all be demons. You ought all to be killed if such is the case. There is no help for you, you must always be living under this whip and rod, and there is no salvation, no escape for you. In the second place, Advaita, and Advaita alone explains morality. Every religion preaches that the essence of all morality is to do good to others. And why? Be unselfish. And why should I? Some God has said it. He is not for me. Some texts have declared it. Let them, that is nothing to me, let them all tell it. And if they do, what is it to me? Each one for himself, and somebody take the hindermost, that is all the morality in the world, at least with many. What is the reason that I should be moral? You cannot explain it except when you come to know the truth as given in the Gita, he who sees everyone in himself, and himself in everyone, thus seeing the same God living in all, he, the sage, no more kills the self by the self. Know through Advaita that whomsoever you hurt yourself, they are all you. Whether you know it or not, through all hands you work, through all feet you move, you are the king enjoying in the palace, you are the beggar leading that miserable existence in the street, you are in the ignorant as well as in the learned, you are in the man who is weak, and you are in the strong. Know this and be sympathetic. And that is why we must not hurt others. That is why I do not even care whether I have to starve, because there will be millions of mouths eating at the same time, and they are the Vedanta 95 all mine. Therefore, I should not care what becomes of me and mine, for the whole universe is mine, I am enjoying all the bliss at the same time, and who can kill me or the universe? Herein is morality. Here, in Advaita alone, is morality explained. The others teach item but cannot give you its reason. Then, so far about explanation. What is the gain? It is strength. Take off that veil of hypnotism which you have cast upon the world, send not out thoughts and words of weakness unto humanity. Know that all sins and all evils can be summed up in that one word, weakness. It is weakness that is the motive power in all evil doing, it is weakness that is the source of all selfishness, it is weakness that makes men injure others, it is weakness that makes them manifest what they are not in reality. Let them all know what they are, let them repeat day and night what they are. Saham. Let them suck it in with their mother's milk, this idea of strength, I am he, I am he. This is to be heard first as o square root e is trademark a o square root e is yo o twiao a o square root a e, etc. And then let them think of it, and out of that thought, out of that heart will proceed works such as the world has never seen. What has to be done? This Advaita is said by some to be impracticable, that is to say, it is not yet manifesting itself on the material plane. To a certain extent that is true, for remember the saying of the Vedas, Ija trademark na as na q indefinite integral e divided by Ija trademark na as na q indefinite integral e u indefinite integral trademark omega at Ija trademark na as na q indefinite integral e ranfa e as e utswo oaa e o omega at om, this is the Brahman, om, this is the greatest reality, he who knows the secret of this om, whatever he desires that he gets. Therefore first know the secret of this om, that you are the om, know the secret of this Tattvamasi, and then alone whatever you want shall come to you. If you want to be great materially, believe that you are so. I may be a little bubble, 96 the glory of Indian civilization, and you may be a wave mountain high, but know that for both of us the infinite ocean is the background, the infinite Brahman is our magazine of power and strength, and we can draw as much as we like, both of us, I the bubble and you the mountain high wave. Believe, therefore, in yourselves. The secret of Advaita is, believe in yourselves first, and then believe in anything else. In the history of the world, you will find that only those nations that have believed in themselves have become great and strong. In the history of each nation, you will always find that only those individuals who have believed in themselves have become great and strong. Here, to India, came an Englishman who was only a clerk, and for want of funds and other reasons he twice tried to blow his brains out, and when he failed, he believed in himself, he believed that he was born to do great things, and that man became Lord Clive, the founder of the empire. If he had believed the Padres and gone crawling all his life, "Oh Lord, I am weak, and I am low," where would he have been? In a lunatic asylum. You also are made lunatics by these evil teachings. I have seen, all the world over, the bad effects of these weak teachings of humility destroying the human race. Our children are brought up in this way, and is it a wonder that they become semi-lunatics? This is teaching on the practical side. Believe, therefore, in yourselves, and if you want material wealth, work it out, it will come to you. If you want to be intellectual, work it out on the intellectual plane, and intellectual giants you shall be. And if you want to attain to freedom, work it out on the spiritual plane, and free you shall be and shall enter into nirvana, the eternal bliss. But one defect which lay in the Advaita was its being worked out so long on the spiritual plane only, and nowhere else. Now the time has come when you have to make it practical. It shall no more be a rahasya, a secret, it shall no more live with monks in caves and forests, and in the Himalayas, it must come the Vedanta 97 down to the daily, everyday life of the people, it shall be worked out in the palace of the king, in the cave of the recluse, it shall be worked out in the cottage of the poor, by the beggar in the street, everywhere, anywhere it can be worked out. Therefore, do not fear whether you are a woman or a Shudra, for this religion is so great, says Lord Krishna, that even a little of it brings a great amount of good. Therefore, children of the Aryans, do not sit idle, awake, arise, and stop not till the goal is reached. The time has come when this Advaita is to be worked out practically. Let us bring it down from heaven unto the earth, this is the present dispensation. The voices of our forefathers of old are telling us to bring it down from heaven to the earth. Let your teachings permeate the world, till they have entered into every pore of society, till they have become the common property of everybody, till they have become part and parcel of our lives, till they have entered into our veins and tingle with every drop of blood there. You may be astonished to hear that as practical Vedantists the Americans are better than we are. I used to stand on the seashore at New York and look at the emigrants coming from different countries, crushed, downtrodden, hopeless, unable to look a man in the face, with a little bundle of clothes as all their possession, and these all in rags, If they saw a policeman they were afraid and tried to get to the other side of the footpath. And, mark you, in 6 months those very men were walking erect, well clothed, looking everybody in the face. And what made this wonderful difference? Say, this man comes from Armenia or somewhere else where he was crushed down beyond all recognition, where everybody told him he was a born slave and born to remain in a low state all his life, and where at the least move on his part he was trodden upon. There everything told him, as it were, slave, you are a slave, remain so. Hopeless you 98 the glory of Indian civilization were born, hopeless you must remain. Even the very air murmured round him, as it were, there is no hope for you, hopeless and a slave you must remain, while the strong man crushed the life out of him. And when he landed in the streets of New York, he found a gentleman, well dressed, shaking him by the hand. It made no difference that the one was in rags and the other well clad. He went a step further and saw a restaurant, that there were gentlemen dining at a table, and he was asked to take a seat at the corner of the same table. He went about and found a new life, that there was a place where he was a man among men. Perhaps he went to Washington, shook hands with the President of the United States, and perhaps there he saw men coming from distant villages, peasants and ill-clad, all shaking hands with the President. Then the veil of Maya slipped away from him. He is Brahman, he who has been hypnotized into slavery and weakness is once more awake, and he rises up and finds himself a man in a world of men. In this country of ours, the very birthplace of the Vedanta, our masses have been hypnotized for ages into that state. To touch them is pollution, to sit with them is pollution. Hopeless they were born, hopeless they must remain. And the result is that they have been sinking, 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 and have come to the last stage to which a human being can come. For what country is there in the world where man has to sleep with the cattle? And for this, blame nobody else, do not commit the mistake of the ignorant. The effect is here and the cause is here too. We are to blame. Stand up, be bold, and take the blame on your own shoulders. Do not go about throwing mud at others, for all the faults you suffer from, you are the sole and only cause. Young men of Lahore, understand this, therefore, this great sin hereditary and national, is on our shoulders. There is no hope for us. You may make thousands of societies, 20,000 political assemblages, 50,000 institutions. These will be the Vedanta 99 of no use until there is that sympathy, that love, that heart that thinks for all, until Buddha's heart comes once more into India, until the words of the Lord Krishna are brought to their practical use, there is no hope for us. You go on imitating the Europeans and their societies and their assemblages, but let me tell you a story, a fact that I saw with my own eyes. A company of Burmans was taken over to London by some persons here, who turned out to be Eurasians. They exhibited these people in London, took all the money, and then took these Burmans over to the continent, and left them there for good or evil. These poor people did not know a word of any European language, but the English consul in Austria sent them over to London. They were helpless in London, without knowing anyone. But an English lady got to know of them, took these foreigners from Burma into her own house, gave them her own clothes, her bed, and everything, and then sent the news to the papers. And, mark you, the next day the whole nation was, as it were, roused. Money poured in, and these people were helped out and sent back to Burma. On this sort of sympathy are based all their political and other institutions. It is the rock foundation of love, for themselves at least. They may not love the world, and the Burmans may be their enemies, but in England, it goes without saying, there is this great love for their own people, for truth, and justice and charity to the stranger at the door. I should be the most ungrateful man if I did not tell you how wonderfully and how hospitably I was received in every country in the West. Where is the heart here to build upon? No sooner do we start a little joint stock company than we try to cheat each other, and the whole thing comes down with a crash. You talk of imitating the English and building up as big a nation as they are. But where are the foundations? Ours are only sand, and, therefore, the building comes down with a crash in no time. 100 The glory of Indian civilization. Therefore, young men of Lahore, raise once more that mighty banner of Advaita, for on no other ground can you have that wonderful love until you see that the same Lord is present everywhere. Unfurl that banner of love. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. Arise, arise once more, for nothing can be done without renunciation. If you want to help others, your little self must go. In the words of the Christians, you cannot serve God and Mammon at the same time. Have Varajya. Your ancestors gave up the world for doing great things. At the present time there are men who give up the world to help their own salvation. Throw away everything, even your own salvation, and go and help others. You are always talking bold words, but here is practical Vedanta before you. Give up this little life of yours. What matters it if you die of starvation, you and I and thousands like us, so long as this nation lives? The nation is sinking, the curse of unnumbered millions is on our heads, those to whom we have been giving ditch water to drink when they have been dying of thirst, and while the perennial river of water was flowing past, the unnumbered millions whom we have allowed to starve in sight of plenty, the unnumbered millions to whom we have talked of Advaita and whom we have hated with all our strength, the unnumbered millions for whom we have invented the doctrine of Lokachara, usage, to whom we have talked theoretically that we are all the same and all are one with the same Lord, without even an ounce of practice. Yet, my friends, it must be only in the mind and never in practice. Wipe off this blot. Arise and awake. What matters it if this little life goes? Everyone has to die, the saint or the sinner, the rich or the poor. The body never remains for anyone. Arise and awake and be perfectly sincere. Our insincerity in India is awful. What we want is character, that steadiness and character that make a man cling onto a thing like grim death. The Vedanta 101 Let the sages blame or let them praise, let Lakshmi come today or let her go away, let death come just now or in 100 years, he indeed is the sage who does not make one false step from the right path. Arise and awake, for the time is passing and all our energies will be frittered away in vain talking. Arise and awake, let minor things, and quarrels over little details and fights over little doctrines be thrown aside, for here is the greatest of all works, here are the sinking millions. When the Mohammedans first came into India, what a great number of Hindus were here, but mark, how today they have dwindled down. Every day they will become less and less till they wholly disappear. Let them disappear, but with them will disappear the marvelous ideas, of which, with all their defects and all their misrepresentations, they still stand as representatives. And with them will disappear this marvelous Advaita, the crest jewel of all spiritual thought. Therefore, arise, awake, with your hands stretched out to protect the spirituality of the world. And first of all, work it out for your own country. What we want is not so much spirituality as a little of the bringing down of the Advaita into the material world. First bread and then religion. We stuff them too much with religion, when the poor fellows have been starving. No dogmas will satisfy the cravings of hunger. There are two curses here, first our weakness, secondly, our hatred, our dried up hearts. You may talk doctrines by the millions, you may have sex by the hundreds of millions, but it is nothing until you have the heart to feel. Feel for them as your Veda teaches you, till you find they are parts of your own bodies, till you realize that you and they, the poor and the rich, the saint and the sinner, are all parts of one infinite whole, which you call Brahman. Gentlemen, I have tried to place before you a few of the most brilliant points of the Advaita system, and now the time has come when it should be carried into practice, not only in this 102 the glory of Indian civilization country but everywhere. Modern science and its sledgehammer blows are pulverizing the porcelain foundations of all dualistic religions everywhere. Not only here are the dualists torturing texts till they will extend no longer, for texts are not India rubber. It is not only here that they are trying to get into the nooks and corners to protect themselves, it is still more so in Europe and America. And even there's something of this idea will have to go from India. It has already got there. It will have to grow and increase and save their civilizations too. For in the West the old order of things is vanishing, giving way to a new order of things, which is the worship of gold, the worship of mammon. Thus this old crude system of religion was better than the modern system, namely competition and gold. No nation, however strong, can stand on such foundations, and the history of the world tells us that all that had such foundations are dead and gone. In the first place we have to stop the incoming of such a wave in India. Therefore, preach the Advaita to everyone, so that religion may withstand the shock of modern science. Not only so, you will have to help others, your thought will help out Europe and America. But above all, let me once more remind you that here is need of practical work, and the first part of that is that you should go to the sinking millions of India, and take them by the hand, remembering the words of the Lord Krishna, FFOU_O, at has is AEA copyright is USO trademark A at U it has EU a trademark E divided by OA trademark A with acute O omega divided by as USO at even in this life they have conquered relative existence whose minds are firm fixed on the sameness of everything, for God is pure and the same to all, therefore, such are said to be living in God.